Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome. I am Councillor Chris Atwell and I am deputising as Chair of the Planning Committee today until the Chair, Councillor Hunt, is able to join the meeting a little bit later on. Please be assured we have put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID-secure manner. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. May I ask members to remain seated throughout the duration of the meeting, and can I advise members to wear a face covering unless seated. Some housekeeping: if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust's fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. So may I draw everyone's attention to the fact the meeting will be live streamed. Everyone speaking will be using the microphone. Hopefully people know how to use the microphone. Red button for on, red button for off. And if you are speaking, you will be on camera. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. And can you remember to turn the microphone off when you have finished? Okay, introductions. Let's start with members.
Councillor Lindstag, member for Baffins Ward.
Thank you.
Councillor Judith Smythe, elected member for St Jude Ward.
Thank you.
Councillor Matt Atkins from Cosham Ward.
Thank you.
Gerald Vernon Jackson from Milton Ward.
Thank you.
Linda Symes from Eastern and Craneswater Ward.
Thank you.
Councillor John Smith, Eastern and Craneswater.
Thank you, John.
Councillor Robert Newcopner Ward.
Thank you. And we have some members of the public, deputies. If I could ask you to introduce yourself and we'll go around the room.
Catherine Richards. I'm doing a deputation for 5 Summers Road.
Thank you.
Carl Simmons with regarding 17 Military Road for a deputation.
17 Military Road. Thank you.
Matt Baker, deputation for 125 Laburnum Grove.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
John McDermott for 125 Laburnum Grove.
Thank you.
It's Henry Thorpe and I'm here to do a deputation on all 4 of the HMAs today.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. And officers.
Karen Martin for Democratic Services.
Thank you, Karen.
Simon Turner for the Planning Department.
Thank you, Simon.
And I'm Kieran Laven. I'm one of the Council's planning solicitors.
Thank you, Kieran. Apologies for absence.
We've had apologies from Councillor George Fielding.
Sorry, Karen.
Councillor George Fielding and Councillor Terry Norton. Councillor Linda Symes is here for Councillor Norton.
Thank you
and
very much.
of course, Councillor Hunt being.
Yes.
I just apologise for lateness, as you've already described.
He'll be arriving when the dentist has finished with him. Okay. Members, declarations of interest.
Chair, my apologies. I'm going to have to nip out between 11 and 11:45 because I've got to speak at a national conference, but I shall be back as soon as I can.
Okay.
And my next appointment after is at 2:30, so I'll need to leave just before 2:30 if we're still going.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. Any interest? Declarations? No. Okay.
Chair.
Sorry to see that.
I have a hospital appointment at 2 o'clock that I can't miss because it's been rescheduled, so I'll be leaving at 1:30, which I just thought I'd make you aware of.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor New. Okay, anything else before we look at the minutes from the previous meeting, which are pages 5 to 21 in my pack? Happy that they are an accurate reflection of the previous meeting, rather than going through them page by page. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt will sign those later on. Simon, update on previous applications.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a few appeals to update the committee on. Appeals received and appeals determined. 5 Stafford Road in Southsea, we have a householder appeal that's come in, so we'll see the result of that in due course. And the same for 7 Oyster Mews, French Street, also a householder appeal that's new in. Then a number of decisions. 27 Lakeside Avenue, a householder application that was a delegated refusal concerning a front dormer window. That was appealed. The inspectorate, however, agreed with the local planning authority that the dormer was too large and prominent and incongruous, and so the appeal was dismissed. 51 Farlington Road, North End, a non-determination appeal, but members may recall we took this to committee to get the opinion of the local planning authority as to what position it would have taken if the appeal hadn't been already submitted for non-determination. That was a change of use from Class C3 to a C3, C4 dwelling house or house in multiple occupation. Members may recall not being happy with the communal space for the scheme. The appeal was allowed. The inspector thought, in a nutshell, that the communal space was acceptable. Red Lodge at 61 Clarence Parade, it's a building that's divided into flats. We had a delegated refusal there previously. It was concerning replacement windows. It's in the conservation area on the seafront there, next to the Queen's Hotel, close to the Queen's Hotel. That was refused because of the inappropriate replacements. The planning authority thought. The inspector agreed, effect on the conservation area and no public benefit put forward to outweigh that harm, so the appeal was dismissed. 39 Carmarthen Avenue in the north of the city was a domestic extension, granted planning permission under delegated powers, but the applicant wasn't happy with a couple of the conditions and so appealed against 2 conditions. They were concerning a privacy screen. It was one of those developments where when you're on a slope, as is common in the north of the city, and you build out of the back of the house, the development will oversail the natural ground level, and then if you have an outdoor terrace there or platform, there are issues to do with looking back or over into the next door's property. So we get these from time to time, and in this instance we felt a privacy screen on the side of the decking was appropriate, and there was also a side window, high-level window, which we also thought was sensible to have frosted as well. As I say, the applicant wasn't happy with those conditions and appealed against them, but the inspector agreed with the local planning authority, so the appeal was dismissed. Lastly, an advert at Derby Road, in central Portsmouth. This was also a non-determination appeal for a new digital LED large hoarding to replace 2 existing 48-sheet billboards. The local planning authority resisted the scheme because it's being in a residential area. There's a general absence of that sort of bright illumination, notwithstanding the current applications, the current adverts there, and the inspector agreed with that point, feeling that the digital display would be more prominent and more dominating with its illumination and greater height. So that appeal was dismissed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, to today's business then. Military Road. Simon, you're presenting everything today.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a domestic extension at Military Road. We have 3 deputies objecting, I think, including Councillor Weems, and the applicant here to speak shortly. So I should just present the scheme to members first. don't think you can see my cursor on the screen, unfortunately. You can see an aerial 3D view of Military Road there in the north of the city, with X marks the spot on the application site. Good size domestic properties. There we are, a bit more detail, bird's eye view. If you note the hipped roofs and so on. So there are the front extensions, the front property. Essentially, there are 4 elements to the scheme. You can see the proposed hip to gables on the side there, which is a front and side extension that runs round the side of the property. And then at the rear of the site, the sizable dormer window at the back, facing down the garden. That's obviously part of the same extension, or overlaps the roof extension. Then those are the first 2 elements. Then you can see the existing side elevation, which has a lean-to. That will be replaced with the flat-roofed rear extension. As the report sets out, that originally was longer, deeper, and officers asked for that to be reduced in scale. There are some plans there showing the ground floor, which gives you an indication of the extensions to the rear and side, and then at higher levels. Sorry, Councillor. It's a bit difficult without the cursor to sort of take you through the site. But that you can see the... Could you do that one more, the ground floor as well? Yes, of course, Councillor. I'm sorry. There you are. So on the right-hand side, you can see the ground floor flat-roofed extension alongside the boundary with number 15, who have objected. And then on the bottom half of the right-hand side drawing, you can see the side extensions as well. You'll note a door there onto the side, which goes on to the neighbouring property number 19, which will be a point of deputation as well. Onto the first floor there, you can make out the increased accommodation at first floor in the rear corner there, effectively, and then up in the roof accommodation as well, with those roof extensions from hip to gables. So there's the front of the property as is, a good sized property that we felt could accommodate some form of extension. We had amended plans during the course of the application to make some refinements. There's next door, number 19. We can come back to these photographs with the deputations as well, or post, of course. Looking to the rear of the property, so the single-storey flat-roofed rear extension will be there at the back, replacing that lean-to, and you can note the conservatory next door to the right at number 15. There it is, looking past the point of the extension of the proposed extension, looking at next door's conservatory, and then the right-hand photograph is, I think, from the conservatory next door, looking back at the application site. That's looking from the application site to the other property towards number 19. The fourth element is the rear garage. So you can see top left, existing property garage. The north elevation is, the existing north elevation is perhaps the public one, serving the back road there. So it's flat roofed. They would like to extend across the width of their plot, as you can see, with a second garage door there. That started off with a pitched roof, which was the point of objection, I think, from one of the neighbours at least, and Councillor Weems was interested in that. We were happy to ask, although it's a big plot and so on, it could have perhaps accommodated the pitched roof. We were happy to ask for its removal, and the applicant was happy to do that. There's the photograph, that's the extended plan, and there is the photograph looking down the garden at the inside of the garage, effectively, the road beyond, and then the right-hand picture shows the garage as existing, so that would be extended across, so you get rid of the gates there, effectively, and have a wider garage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon.
Now,
so we have some deputations.
We do. So we have three written deputations. from 3 objectors, and then Mr. Semmons is here to make his verbal deputation. So shall I read through the 3 written deputations? Mrs. Horsell lives at number 19 on the right-hand side there, the neighbouring property, and I mentioned a doorway. This is the point of her concern. She apologises today for not attending due to a health appointment. She was pleased to see the garage extension now at a height in keeping with the rest of the road. There have been other alterations also that changed some of the original documentation. Referring us to the initial application in August last year, question 7 of the application form asks if there is any alteration to access to and from the public highway. The answer was no. Mrs. Horsell notes on the first proposed ground floor plan, this would have been accurate as no access was shown for the extension. However, the amended drawing now shows a new door coming out of the extension, which you can see on the right-hand side, to the side. Thank you. So on the left-hand side you have the existing site layout, which has a side gate which connects the back garden of the application site into the front forecourt of number 19. Filling that hole, the applicants have proposed to slightly relocate the opening and have a doorway that would open still just onto the side front court of number 19. Indeed, Mrs. Horsell points out there's currently a gate which leads into the rear garden of 17, accesses from our drive, although it's rarely been used in the past 24 years. It is not an entrance into the house, but to the garden. Sorry to be pedantic, but the amended ground floor plan is again incorrect, as it shows the gate in question coming out onto our drive and close to the main property, which is not the case. The original side gate to the back garden of the application site was put in place when the houses were first built, numbers 19 to 25, in the 1930s. It allowed the first owner of number 17 to take soil, etc., across the road from his back garden. I understand he had a market garden. Historically, there has always been a parking space at number 19 outside my garage, hence a carport was put in place. Other parking spaces were created later. There's the car parking ports to the side of 19. In 2015, the garage at number 19 was converted into an annex to provide accommodation for my mother. Plans were submitted to the council, but as the footprint remained the same, it did not require planning permission. The only stipulation from the council was that we must ensure we had the capacity for 3 parking spaces. Work was overseen and inspected. The parking space under the carport is still used for parking and will be an ideal place for an electric car charger in the future. Thank you for listening to my concerns. Now to the other next door property to the left-hand side of the photograph, the other half of the semi, from Paul and Debbie Graham, number 15. Again, unfortunately, neither of us can attend, so please accept our written deputation. Our primary concern is the proposed new build is that the ground floor extension will be built within inches of a glass-sided conservatory. It will not only cut out 95% of our natural light and leave us with the most unattractive brick wall, but as an outlook, but further massively reduce the natural light into the dining room, which butts directly onto the conservatory. With a view to the future, any maintenance or cleaning of the exterior windows, this will be rendered virtually impossible. Having lived here for 40 years, this will be a hard pill to swallow, although whatever the outcome, we hope there will be no hard feelings between us and our new neighbours. And thirdly, I'm sorry, Councillor Weems is for, do we have a deputation for this one from Councillor? No, I'm sorry, that's for a future item. It was just 2 written deputations.
All right. Thank you, Simon. Mr. Semmons, are you wanting to give a deputation?
Yes, thank you. The reason I attended today to see if there was any concerns with what the neighbours were saying about the property regarding the door in the side access is that was put on to the deeds in 1930 for access around to the rear of the property. And when the councillor came round to take the pictures and have a look at, well, the planning lady came round, I said to her about the door. And she said, if you're going to put a door back in there, you need to put it onto your drawings, because I didn't know I had to put it on your drawings at that time. So that's why I had the drawings re-amended to put the door in. But that was the only real concern that I've got. The rest of it, the planning people we've already compromised. Like with the garage roof, I've had to reduce the size of the rear extension for the light side of it, and I've had to reduce the dormer on the roof as well. So hopefully that the council were all happy with that, and to see what the outcome was today. But I was only here mainly to see what the concerns were with the neighbours. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Members, questions? Councillor Atkins.
So with the side doorway and the driveway, is the driveway the property then of number 19, but it has a sort of right-of-way with gate access in the existing property to number 17? Is that that's what?
Thank you, Councillor. We understand there is a private easement from number 17 across number 19, but really, essentially, as the report says, it's a private matter between individual parties. It doesn't affect determination of the planning application, in our opinion.
And is the placement of the door due to, does it come out right in front of what was a garage and is now a sort of an extension, is it?
That's right.
Any other questions, members? And comments? Councillor New.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a fairly straightforward planning application. I think it's quite refreshing as well to see that the applicant has taken on previous concerns and come back to us. I think it seems quite diligent, sir, if you allow me to say so. And on that basis, I would move the recommendation to approve it, if somebody wants to second that.
Thank you, Councillor New. Councillor Symes, second. Okay, well, we have speedily come to that conclusion. Any other views? Okay. Shall we vote? In favour of moving the motion as recommended by the officers?
Thank you. That was unanimous approval. I see that Councillor Vernon Jackson has left the room.
Thank you, Kieran. Thank you. You have your planning permission. Okay, to the next application, Paddington Road.
Thank you, Chairman. Members may recall this application some members, at the 8th of December committee. It is an application for a change of use from a dwelling house from Class C3 to a Class C3 or Class C4 small HMO. Members may recall that the item was deferred on the one point about bicycle storage and indeed getting access through the property to the rear where the bicycle storage is normally proposed in properties such as this. So members asked officers to go away and to look at possible alternatives, and I think mention was made then, if not later, about the bike hanger project that some members may be familiar with. So as the report sets out, there's been a trial across the city for bike hangers, in the report in front of you, there is one of them photographed, which shows how residents can rent a space effectively and use their storage on the street. So a number of locations across the city have trialled such facilities, typically on the carriageway, on the road, but they don't have to be there, they could be on another piece of land, typically just storing between 4 and 6 bikes. This has been deemed to be a success, and so the scheme is being adopted, and further hangars will be installed around the city, subject to demand and funding availability. So we have explored whether or not this is feasible for this particular site. So taking you through the report, we have highlighted in different typeface the extra text inserted now that wasn't there in December to hopefully pick it out for you. So paragraph 2.8 and the diagram below, we've shown a tracking route of how a bicycle would be wheeled through the property. And then on to page 12, stroke page 34, paragraph 4.9, we've taken you through the options for the hangar. The Local Highways Authority is a bit concerned about the hangar. It accepts that in many buildings across this city, it is accepted that you have to wheel your bike through the property. I have to in my house, for example, to get to the back garden. Some forecourts aren't big enough, or people would prefer anyway to have the storage at the back and leave their front yards or gardens clear for plants or bins or just clear. So they didn't particularly want to support this proposal in this instance, or more widely, I don't think. And they've gone on, this is the Local Highways Authority, to comment on the tracking proposals, which they feel is a typical arrangement. So they don't raise an objection to the application. And then towards the end of the report, page 16, page 38, there's been a slight revised internal layout to simplify the route indeed through the property. And then further details on the costs of installing such a hangar. So while officers acknowledge the benefits bike hangars certainly can have, and indeed the project's been extended across the city, there's no adopted policy position for them, and the Local Highways Authority doesn't in this instance wish to insist upon it for this property. So I think with the slightly adjusted internal layout demonstrating the tracking through the property, the Planning Authority and the Highways Authority felt happy to still recommend the development as originally proposed, albeit with that slight alteration to layout, and we propose to have an informative, nevertheless, to highlight the possible facility to the applicant.
Thank you, Simon. Members? Yes,
Looking at the overall combined living space here.
Sorry. Apologies, Mr. Thorpe. And we've got Councillor Swan.
He's down, but I don't know if he's here.
Not written you.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, all right. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Thorpe, sorry. And I know you have a presentation as well, I think.
Not for this one, but I do have one question to ask before I do a deputation on this one. What exactly is the committee considering here? Just the cycling or the entire application? Because they've amended the plans, so I think you now need to look at the entire application. And then I'll do a deputation when I know what I'm talking about.
Okay, Simon.
The minor amendment is simply to the ground floor, just to ease, I think, in the kitchen area, the tracking through the back of the property.
Yeah, but to clarify, the committee that's sitting here isn't the committee that made a partial decision last time, and it only did that to end the conversation. So I think from a democratic purpose, you actually need to consider the entire application.
Okay, Kieran?
Yes, Mr. Thorpe's correct in what he says. The committee is rehearing this item, which is the normal consequences of a deferral, because we can't guarantee the same membership from one meeting to the next. It changes. So, yes.
So we continue.
Yes, continue to consider the entire application, please. Yeah, Mr. Thorpe, if you could start your deputation.
I don't think I have to cite my deputation. I think you have to introduce the entire subject and the entire application again, which hasn't been done. Why am I arguing about process here when I've even put this in a deputation to the last planning application accidentally?
Mr. Thorpe, we've just received a presentation from the planning officer, and the report is before the committee. The entire application is before this committee.
But the the presentation was only about bicycles.
Okay, but I think we have to make some progress. So, Mr. Thorpe, do you want to give your deputation?
Yeah, I'll give a deputation then, but I seriously think you're breaking process here, and the lawyers admitted it. I think what I'll actually do is read what Councillor Swan was going to say, because he's written it very very clearly in his application. He's written, "Objecting to HMOs in Copner is almost a weekly occurrence for me, and the number of applications seem to have increased exponentially in the recent months, which is extremely worrying. I also note that there have now been 4 HMO applications in Chichester Road in the past 5 weeks. Something has to give, and it shouldn't be the residents. I renew my objections and lodged previously. Copner has always been an incredibly family-orientated community with 6 schools in the area and a very large number of family homes. And this is the essence of what makes Copner a fantastic place to live. The proliferation of HMOs in the past few years has been felt right across Copner, and we are now at tipping point now where to proceed further when granting of each and every application that is literally ripping the heart out of our communities. The arguments against HMOs are numerous, and I know that the planning department and committee are no strangers to that facts, that HMOs cause more road congestion, less parking in areas, more pressure on doctors, dentists, medical services, as well as very frequently bring noise, mess and antisocial crime and behaviour. Residents have had enough and just feel ignored by concerns. I understand fully what the planning status states and the guidelines to assess HMO applications, but for the good of the community, I yet again reaffirm my adamant request that all applications for HMOs in Copner Ward be halted until further details and a review of HMOs already in the area have taken place. And then the best bit, and the bit that I think everyone in this room should listen to who are councillors: democracy and true representation remain at the heart of what any of us who care about communities do to ensure that residents have a voice, and this cannot eternally be rejected because of a flawed policy in place. I sincerely ask the Planning Department and the Planning Committee to reject these applications and prevent the community from being ripped apart and thrown to the wind. This is exactly what is happening to this residents, and it must be before a faceless and unscrupulous developer. So that's what Councillor Benedict Swan had to say, and he wrote that very clearly on the planning portal, if you wonder where that came from. Procedurally, this is really odd because I shouldn't be allowed to do a second deputation on an already heard planning application, and everyone in this room needs to be very clear that they can raise any point regarding the entire application because this is a new application. In terms of the bike shelters, this was absolutely broadside. This wasn't in the original application, it wasn't in the plan, it wasn't considered by members. The community haven't been consulted about it. The conclusion's correct in the report in terms of what can be done with bicycles. There's no way that a house that provides 0.5 car parking spaces for its residents should be allowed to use 0.75 car parking spaces to put in a bike hanger, particularly when the bicycles are perfectly capable of being parked in the forecourt and can have some access to the rear of the property. The planning condition that should have been put in place, but again, you guys aren't reviewing your policy, was to put in storage locks in the forecourt so that you could chain the bike up and you only had to take the bike through the house when it was being left for a prolonged period of time and wasn't covered in dirt and crime. We all know that's the solution, you just need to write a policy to do it. I have very serious concerns about the way that planning's done in this city, because all these applications are not being assessed against the planning policy and the planning framework and all of Portsmouth City Council's documents. They're all being assessed against interpretations of what the planning inspectorate may say. This house should have a rejection in front of you for failure to meet the parking standards by 0.25 car parking spaces. The fact that that would be rejected at appeal means you guys need to go away and change your policy, not the planning officers constantly making stuff up and constantly creating arguments on behalf of the applicants. It's not really on. And I think that's all that I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Councillor Smythe.
Directing this whole application as ab initio, which is what we're doing, I'd just like to ask a question about the combined living space, which currently is shown as 26.89 square metres against the required standard of 34 square metres. And I understand that the reason that that is less is because of the size of the bedrooms and the existence of en suites and so forth. I'd be very interested to know how that compares with the communal space that was the reason for a refusal of an application that I understand from your introduction, Mr. Turner, was allowed at appeal before we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I'd have to get up the plans for the other one to be able to start to see the comparisons of the plans and the actual figures for spaces. So in terms of configuration as well as actual floor space, I'd have to...
Perhaps you could do it while we're is it?
I can have a go. With respect to the communal space for this one, yes, you're correct. The 34 square metres is the normal standard. Looking at page 15/37 on the report, in this instance it's 26.89, but that is permissible when each of the bedrooms is more than 10 square metres, which they are, some by some way, some just squeaking through. So yes, so the combined living space does meet the standard due to the size of the bedrooms. And then with respect to bathrooms and so on, each room has an ensuite. Or certainly 4 of them do. Not the 2 ground floor ones, they share a bathroom.
I mean, this is the size of this living space, particularly the kitchen, is potentially reduced in a sense by having bicycles going through to the back. Although I appreciate that this is a less tortuous route than it was on previous plans we saw.
Judith, just for people at home watching in, just if you get a little bit closer, I can hear you, but I'm not sure everybody else can.
I was just saying that I thought the configuration here with the kitchen, which can also be used as a sort of corridor for bicycles, will be a particularly challenging space to use as well. And has that been taken into account?
Councillor, you asked about the use of the communal area. Yep. Well, it's there in front of you. You can choose different sorts of layouts that are indicative and what actually emerges. Here they've shown the kitchen. As you go into the room, you've got kitchen cabinets on your left, kitchen surfaces, sink and so on. And on the right, hobs and whatnot. And then the room opens out a bit more once you pass the kitchen part of the double room. And you've got a dining table shown in the middle. And then beyond that, you've got the seating area shown at the back. So it seems like a reasonable layout that could be a suggested layout that could be provided in that accommodation, in combination, of course, with the size of the bedrooms. I haven't got the scheme you referred to at appeal, Councillor, was 51 Farlington Road. I haven't got the report and the plans up yet, but that had a communal living space of 25.6 square metres, one square metre smaller than this one, as it happens. And with the bedrooms of, so it's a pretty comparable situation actually in bare figures. The layout will be slightly different, of course, each property will be slightly different, but in any event, what's in front of you at 19 Paddington meets our standards, and then you've got a judgment to make on the adequacy of the layout.
Any more questions? Councillor Stagg.
Am I interpreting this correctly, that you have to take your bikes through the kitchen in order to put them in the rear? Is that right? So somebody who's cooking there could have somebody going past with a bike? Is that not a safety risk?
I think you're going to have this sort of arrangement in quite a lot of properties. It does depend how you decide to arrange your kitchen. They could, if they wanted, conceivably, have the kitchen midway down, beyond the back door, at the far end of the property, looking down the garden, for example, to resolve that sort of thing. I don't know about the existing plumbing arrangements and electrics and so on in that, excuse me, in that property. Yes, I don't think it's ideal. But I think when people are used to people coming and going, they know each other, they've obviously got to be sensible about how they manage that.
So has the risk assessment been done? I'm just trying to put myself in the position that I'm cooking. The sink is on the left, so if I've got, if I'm straining vegetables, go from the cooker on the right, and I'm going across with the pan full of boiling water, and somebody comes around the corner with a bike, it's not a very good situation.
I don't think it's ideal, Councillor. I don't know if licensing look at that or not, or even building regulations. Landlords would know what they do need or not need to do before they make the planning application, but I can't advise on that further, I must say.
Thank you.
Councillor Atkins.
First of all, on the bike storage, can I confirm there is no current plan, it's not associated with this application to put a bike storage shed on the street in the road, is there?
I'm not aware of one.
I just wanted to clarify, because I don't like the principle that the City Council and the street should be accommodating the bike storage that belongs on the property. But that is not part of this application, so I just want to make that clear.
We're on questions.
My second question here is, in relation to the bedroom sizes, is this something that is this calculated from plans, is it, that you taken from an architect or the applicant themselves? The council officers don't actually go around and measure the rooms themselves for these applications?
They could do if they wanted to. Yeah, we ask for the plan drawer to put they measure the size of the rooms, and we can double check that in the office with our own measurements on plan. And if we want to on site, if we think something looks awry, not quite right, we can double check physically on the site.
A lot of the room sizes are very close to 10 metres, but you are satisfied they're all just over?
Yes, I'm sure the case officer would have checked carefully.
Comments, members? Oh, you got... Lynn, yeah.
I just want to say that the bike hangers, they're not a policy of Portsmouth City Council. They are put in at the request of residents, and that is entirely separate from... I know it's not part of the application, it's just a suggestion, but just to make it clear that if residents ask for them and there are enough people in favour and we have the money to do it, that's when they'll be put in, but they're not otherwise automatically put in.
Anybody else? Anybody want to move the proposal? I'm happy to. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendations if there is a seconder. Councillor Smith, thank you. To the vote. As per the officer's recommendations. Anybody else? 4. Anybody else? 4. And against? And abstain.
So the motion passes with 3 in favour, 2 against and 1 abstention.
Sorry.
4 as well. Was it you as well? Sorry.
4.
4 in favour, 2 against, 1 abstention.
Thank you, Kieran. To the next item. Oriole Road.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry for the delay. We have 2 deputations that we shall come to shortly. A written one from Councillor Weems and Mr. Henry Thorpe, who's requested a PowerPoint presentation from himself at the same time. The application, 49 Oriel Road, is for a change of use from Class C3 dwelling house to a Class 3 dwelling house or Class C4 small house in multiple occupation. That is for up to 6 people. There is the application property. There it is, its location in the road, south-facing rear. Here you have on the left the existing plans, and on the right the proposed plans. Now, members may recall this application was previously considered before Christmas, in November it was, by the Planning Committee. Not exactly the same application, but the same proposal for the change of use to C3, C4. It was refused because it was considered the conservatory, which you can see in the top left in the existing, was proposed for retention, and members felt that the conservatory and the utility room, which is between the kitchen and the study, I think it is, was deemed to be an unacceptable arrangement there on the ground floor. So it's difficult to see perhaps, and I don't have my cursor working, but it doesn't work for you, I don't think. But from the front of the house you have, I think it's a bedroom, and then moving through you have 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms and a WC towards the rear of the house. So members were not happy with that conservatory at the rear in terms of the functionality of the communal spaces. So the applicant has reapplied, and as you can see from the proposed plans, would have a permitted development rear extension at ground floor, and also a permitted development rear side dormer window at a roof level. In terms of the HMO count in the area, as shown on the plan, including the application site, there will be 2.73 within the 50-metre radius, well below the 10% threshold set by policy. It's a view of the street. And some photographs of the internal accommodation, the living room, the kitchen, the rear garden, the dining room. So that is the conservatory that you can see going through there at the moment, that will be opened up and extended with the permitted development extension. Bedroom and bathroom. And then in terms of the size of accommodation, the bedrooms are set out there on page 25/47, in excess of the 10-metre guideline, or indeed 6.51 for single occupancy, because the communal living area is at 36.1 square metres, so the bedrooms only need to be 6.51 square metres. So all the standards are easily exceeded. And there's some ensuite bathrooms as well to the bedrooms. So that's the general overview of the property for you. I shall read out the written deputation from Councillor Weems before we go on to Mr Thorpe's deputation. This is from Councillor Weems. I'm sorry I'm unable to attend today's meeting, but I hope the following explains the situation developing in Hilsea. Since I've been elected, I've been to this committee for multiple HMO applications. Hundreds of residents have written to me explaining the issues that have befallen them over recent months due to numerous applications plaguing roads such as Oriel, Shadwell, St Chad's and Ophir. As I've explained to them, I will continue to bring these applications to the committee until the policy is finally changed. The local plan is not fit for purpose. Developers are viewing Hilsea as a perfect location to turn good family homes into crammed, overdeveloped dwellings for transient workers, many of whom are caught in a never-ending cycle living in one crammed home to the next. The initial application here was rejected for good reason. The shared living space was not big enough. The house is not big enough to accommodate the many people living side by side, regardless of what new proposition has been made. Stuffing 6 people into a home and stating, please see the report, That is, it is considered that the level of activity associated with the use of any property as a Class C dwelling house for a single family will be unlikely to be significantly different than the occupation of property by 3 to 6 unrelated persons as an HMO is frankly insulting. I ask whether anyone from the planning department has actually lived in an HMO or indeed lived near one. From my own experience, HMOs operate differently to what can be expected of a family home, as their occupants come and go at all times of day. Secondly, most occupants drive. The highway statement is not accurate at all. 2 cars is the minimum amount allocated for the property. Yet in this part of the city, driving is a necessity to get to work. 6 people equals 6 cars. This doesn't include the multiple flat conversions on the road, which again probably equates to 2 cars per flat. There is little place to park at most times of the day, and it is non-existent after 4 p.m, I think, where people have to park multiple roads away to get a space. Additionally, each occupant will have guests, and with the absence of a matriarch or patriarch in a family home, there will be arguments and excessive noise pollution. Occupants do not usually engage with the community who take pride in their home. You can often spot an HMO a mile away. Furthermore, I'd like to draw the committee to paragraph 4.5, page 23, which states a petition containing 160 signatures have been received, raising concern regarding the effectiveness of local HMO policies and other concerns. However, it is noted the petition relates to the previous application on the site and does not specify the current application. This is a quote from the report. While the comments in the petition are noted, limited weight has been given to the petition. Councillor Weems says, this is ludicrous. The 160 signatures and opinions did not suddenly change when the developer slightly increased the common living space. The problems associated with this property that I have listed below have not changed either. This application must be rejected for the following reasons. The kitchen area is still too small. If 6 people operate like a family, they will cook and eat at the time. 6 different meals, multiple cookers needed, negative externalities will arise. A home office with a shower is obviously just another bedroom. Please see floor plan. The bicycle shelter is just a gesture and realistically will be unusable given the layout of the house. Room sizes are particularly small as the bathrooms remove space. I'd be amazed if you could fit a bed, wardrobe, desk, sideboard and chest of drawers on the floor plan. Think of the impact on immediate neighbours if there's a problem. The loss of privacy in their gardens due to the proposed extension is abhorrent. Most of these houses have shared drains. The Edwardian sewers cannot cope with this strain. The council is sending the wrong message to the applicant's agent and the landlords who use them. Greed, greed, greed. Thank you to the committee for their time today, but I have no faith due to the current policy. I would welcome a meeting with any member who shares my sentiments. Councillor Weems.
Thank you, Simon. So Mr. Thorpe has a presentation.
I have the presentation loaded into ours, so I can, if the chairman's happy for me to scroll through when you want each slide shown.
Okay, let's start with slide number 1. Okay, this is actually what got me starting coming to this planning committee, and it was after watching the treatment of the residents in neighbouring Shadwell Road. So what I did was I did a petition of the 4 neighbouring roads, and the map that you can see is the number of HMOs in the street or under application within those 4 roads. These have all been put in within the last 4 years, with the exception of 2 of the properties which don't have planning permission because they predate all the policies. As you can see, the area has been completely decimated by HMOs. The concentration of HMOs is unacceptable, and there's just putting in more and more HMOs within a very limited area. That is not a long street extending halfway across Portsmouth. That is a 50-house road going between 2 main artery roads in the city, both of which are on main bus routes. I have very serious concerns with the 50 square metre policy that you're using to assess homes. It's clearly not assessing the damage that you're doing to the community, and anyone that looks at that map will understand why more HMOs is not acceptable. Can I move to the next slide? I've been asking the council now for about 5 months what their own planning policy means and the condition that you repeatedly approve to every single application, which is, unless otherwise agreed in writing, the local planning authority and the permission hereby granted shall be carried out in accordance with the following drawings. Nobody can answer that question, nobody wants to answer that question, and it's because you know that all the drawings that are being proposed to you are lies. The initial application for this house, which is the one from 2 months ago, didn't have a third storey, didn't have an extension, didn't have bathrooms in all of it. What you're actually seeing now is a more truthful application, which the applicants haven't been doing until about the last 2 months, when they've realised that now you'll approve anything. But if you look at the last 40 HMO applications, I can tell you about 35 of them follow the same pattern with a permitted development extension, rubber stamped without consultation, and then it's not built in accordance, and then they apply for being more than 7 people in the bedroom, which is what Councillor Weems has said. Next slide. First of all, this application shouldn't be in front of you. There were five roads shown on that drawing. All 5 of them have older HMO applications in place than this one that haven't been heard. So I'm not even sure why we're here discussing number 49 Oriel Road. It just shows that you don't have control over the planning process or the planning department or the order in which it goes. We also have problems with a lack of understanding of permitted development by the case officers. Permitted development is not a 3-metre extension onto the back of any home in Portsmouth, which is what they're saying. It's a 3-metre extension onto the back of the original floor plan of the house. So all of these houses have large rear extensions that have already used up all the permitted development rights, and in reality used up more than the permitted development rights. And the reports repeatedly keep saying that these extensions are done within the rights of permitted development, which isn't true. The other problem that you've got, and this is a problem for you, the councillors, is that permitted development fundamentally undermines the planning process, because the buildings don't look like you're approving them, and the applicants know this. Of the six cities that I've studied the HMO policy for them, 4 of them ban permitted development in C3 and C4 properties for this reason, because they know that it'll go out of control. They know that the loft conversion will go in with another 2 bedrooms. They know that the entire living space will be moved into the back garden, and they know that it'll become a mini hotel, which is beyond what the residents can cope with. There's no accountability for these inaccurate reports that keep getting presented to the council. You as councillors need to stand up and sort out the reports so that they're factually correct. That is your role, and because they're not accountable to anyone else. The only person that has any form of accountability is the applicant, because they have an appeals process. Myself as an objector, I don't have an appeals process. The only thing that I can do is take you to a judicial review, which will cost thousands and thousands of pounds, whereas the applicant has a free ability to reapply and to appeal, which isn't really going to happen. Can we go on to the next page, which is, this is the list of, so I objected on 30 grounds to this property, and it got whittled down to about 8 or 9 points, of which 80% of them weren't even addressed in the report, and the ones that were kind of interpreted in favour of the applicant, which isn't on. They always form arguments on behalf of the applicant, which isn't on. If we go to the next slide. This is a first for the council. Can we actually talk about good work within the council? Because this is what upsets me with this meeting, that you delegate your responsibility, but then you don't review what responsibility you've delegated. So this is Gladys Avenue. This is the top of Oriel Road. This is a planning application that was in at the end of December, so it's newer than this, and it's already been partially rejected. The HMO aspect has been referred to the council by Councillor Weems, even though it's actually in Nelson Ward, but we'll ignore that fact. So that's good that he's actually concentrating on the issue. And then the council, this is part of the application, so this is the extension that obligatory goes in, and this is what they've rejected. And as you can see, they're proposing an extension that leaves no outdoor space and is a complete overdevelopment. And for the first time in the council's life, they've actually rejected the extension exceptions, and they're now only going to consider the HMO. This is exactly the same problem you've got in the Oriel Road property, where the extension is practically to the limit of the boundary, and it's a complete overdevelopment of the site. You can see it on the plans by the proximity of the bike shelter to the back of the house. I really hope that you start looking at the plans and the reports in more detail, and you consider the impacts of the neighbourhood. If we can go to the next slide. That shows this HMO. As you can see, it's now much more truthful in its plans. I'm going to talk about toilets and stuff and noise and building control in the next deputation because I don't have enough time, but that's also an issue that you don't have control over. And then if we go to the final slide. Okay, I forgot about this one. Subdivided properties. I've tried to work out why Oriel Road is one of the worst places in the city to park, and it's because you've already given an exemption to 20% of the properties to be subdivided, and you now consider the solution to subdividing properties to subdivide it into even more smaller boxes, and therefore it's okay because it's a balanced community. This is not sensible or sane logic. You've given That's the facts for 23 Oriel Road. The neighbourhood list wasn't published for this one, but as we're within 30 to 40 yards of it, the facts are pretty similar. If we go on to the next page, which is the concluding statement, you can see a nice picture of the road. You can see that put that map into scale, that it's not a road across half the city, and you can see the number of HMOs going into all 4 of those roads, and all of them are super HMOs with extensions on the top, an unbalanced community. That's all I've got to say. Thank you for your time, and I'm sorry to use the tone that I am, but I'm starting to get a bit despaired with coming to this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Okay. In terms of on one of the slides, I think we don't typically respond in reports to matters that aren't material planning considerations. And because it often comes up, doesn't it? People say there will be antisocial behaviour and other kind of things around HMOs, which may or may not be true, but you don't typically respond to those issues.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, we're happy to confirm whether or not we believe something is a material planning consideration. Antisocial behaviour could be, and people will have their own opinions as to whether or not HMOs in general, or specifically any particular case, may or may not generate any antisocial behaviour.
Thank you. Members, questions? Matt?
I'll go for you. I don't mind if you want to go first. Well, quite a lot was made in both deputations there about our various planning policies. I could kind of go through the points raised one by one, or I could just invite you to respond to any points you feel, about our policies that need response, because I think there were a few that did. Do you want to start, and if there's anything left, I'll come to it specifically at the end.
Thank you, Councillor. A lot of points were made, so let's see. I'll try and stick to the principal ones made. I think there was a comment about the order of decisions, and some older applications have not been determined. I make it clear to the committee that that may be the case for whatever reason, but if an application, for example here, is live and within the 50-metre radius of this application site, we will count that and deal with that in the report. So there's nothing sort of falling by the wayside that we don't know about and don't take into consideration. So that's important to make that point. Mr. Thorpe has asked questions about whether or not permitted development rights are understood by officers. Of course they are. One of the points was about from which point at the rear of the development do you measure the distance beyond. We do look at that very carefully, using historical maps, photographs, comparing properties to other properties. You can sometimes see what were original extensions or original features of the property. So we do carefully check to make sure at what point they can build off from as being permitted development or not. So that is important that we do look at that. There was a point earlier on about the plans, and does anyone understand the condition which requires the development to be set out as per the plans? That's there for a good reason. It means that the ensuite for bedroom 1 is indeed provided. because that's important. It means that the use of all the different rooms is provided as shown, because that's how the application has been assessed. So that's effectively what that condition is requiring, and that's the same for any virtually any development. And it is checkable, because should we have an enforcement complaint saying that the property isn't being used as approved, or they haven't done this or the other, we can of course visit and check the approved plans against what's actually in situ. Mr. Thorpe didn't think that all his comments had been picked up in the report. We do summarise, of course, various comments, but I'm always certainly very careful with colleagues to make sure that we have covered everything. It may be heavily summarised and as out of necessity in the report, but we do try and make sure that we summarise all of the main points so that they are picked up and indeed responded to. 58 Gladys Avenue, I think there may be two different applications going on there at the same time from what Mr. Thorpe has said. He said that it was rejected for the first time. That's not the case. For prior approval, rear domestic extension, it's only if one of the neighbours objects on amenity grounds within the 21 days can the local planning authority then determine the application. If there's no objection, we cannot, and it goes through. But when a neighbour does object, we then take the opportunity to take a view one way or the other. In this instance, it would appear that we weren't happy indeed with the effect of that on the neighbour, and it was refused. Otherwise, matters of noise and parking, there's a debate there to be had about the effect of HMOs, and some of the comments from the councillor as well. We don't assume that all HMOs, or any HMOs necessarily, have more noise or more parking than other properties, and so we have parking standards in the SPD. We have representations on each application from the Local Highways Authority, who I don't think have objected in this instance. We do realise that there is a lot of congestion in the city, density of development and parking, but there's not generally held to be a significant or material difference between the occupation of a property, whether as a house or as an HMO. Not all people necessarily will have cars in an HMO. Some will, some won't, and the same in a dwelling house that may be occupied by one person, or a family with 2 cars for the parents and 2 cars for grown children. So you can't make too many assumptions on maximum occupancy and car parking. Those were the main things, Councillor, that I thought perhaps you'd like to hear a reply on.
That's helpful. I think you've covered most of the things that occurred to me there. In terms of the permitted development rights, you are looking for the original footprint of the house then, in terms of where you start measuring from the back, or is there a point at which it resets? So, like, if it's been that way for 50 years, do you get new permitted developments to extend again, or is it based on the original footprint of the house? And so that is what you've attempted to identify in this case.
It would normally be the original, which counts as pre-war, or is it pre-1948? I forget now the exact date, around that sort of time.
I can assist on that. I've got the permitted development order in front of me. Simon's just touched on it in reference to the 1948 date. So original is defined for the purposes of the general permitted development order as A, in relation to a building other than a building which is Crown land existing on the 1st of July 1948 as existing on that date. In relation to a building other than a building which is on Crown land built on or after 1st of July 1948 as so built. And I don't think we need to concern ourselves with the other two, but people can look them up if they want to. As I say, it's defined within the order itself, the word original.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kieran. Councillor Stagg.
Thank you. Why is there such a difference between the number of HMOs on the map that are in our papers and the map that the gentleman showed us?
I'd have to analyse in more detail exactly what is shown and where the data arises. What we provide is the data that we have at our resource from the three sources: planning history, licensing and council tax records, and then obviously with publicity letters to neighbours and asking councillors, we also will look, and indeed some site visits, at any other properties which are identified as potential HMOs. So we've got three data sources plus on the ground information that we believe is a pretty good record of what actually exists on the ground.
Could a lot of those be unofficial, not legal HMOs?
There may be unknown HMOs on a street that our data records haven't picked up, and that is part of the reason in publicity with councillors and local residents, because they will tell us if they believe there is an HMO, and that occasionally happens, and we will investigate and take into account. It may either turn out to be a flat rather than HMO, or that use hasn't occurred, or it may indeed be an unlawful one, and we would take that into account as part of the considerations.
I'm just a bit concerned that I'm going to make a decision based on facts, in inverted commas, which may not actually be 100% true. You know, if there are these unofficial HMOs around, the impact on the area is going to be much greater than the ones officially on the map. But I've got to make a decision now. I mean, I know I'm only one of many, but if I think that I'm not getting the right information on which to base that decision, it worries me. And that's not a question, I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's don't questions, but okay.
I'm trying to phrase it into a question. What can I do?
We'll move on.
Could I answer, Chairman?
Okay. Yeah.
We have the data sources that are good and reliable. There are three data sources: council tax records, licensing and planning records. And as I say, we supplement that with on-the-ground evidence the case officer may see, or neighbours or councillors may also bring to our attention. So we do think the data we provide to you is robust, council, and can be relied upon for decision-making.
Judith.
Could we see the map that was provided by the deputy there is at a different scale as the one that we've got in our pack? I wonder if we could just see that, and then we can compare the two, just to see that there aren't any that are mispleased. Okay. Can that be made slightly bigger, or is that impossible? Okay, so I mean, this map up here is at a very different scale to the one that we've been offered to show the 15 metres. Am I right?
Yes, Councillor, I can see that immediately. To remind members, it's a 50-metre radius from an application property. So Oriel Road is in the bottom of the bottom half of the site. So 50-metre radius is going to pick up. I'm not sure what the different colours are. I think the green ones are probably the ones that Mr. Thorpe is referring to. At most, one or two of those would be within the 50-metre radius, which would tally probably with the figures we've got in the report at 2.73 within the 50 metres. So, you know, the majority of those, councillor, as you say, are further away than the 50-metre radius, so they're not counted because they're outside the policy standard.
Thank you. That partly answers the question. Can we just, you can't use your cursor, can you? But we're talking about the application site being on Oriel Road, being the one where the grey line is. Is that right? Near CKS plastering.
I think that's approximately the location, councillor, yes.
And we're talking about there being, even if you count the application at number 78, it only brings it up to 2.73% of the 10% threshold. Is that right?
That's right.
Yes, I think once one looks at this in the scale, am I right that we should be quite careful to look at them together, those maps? Thank you.
Okay. Comments, members? Councillor New.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's disappointing, isn't it? Yeah, again, we're all here, kind of having to talk about policy and shortcomings being put before us. I think Councillor Stagg's absolutely right. We're being asked to make a decision potentially on what the planning department is basing everything on. We've talked time and time again. I think every planning meeting I come to, we sit there talking about the HMO database, and we all question the validity of it. And I do take the officers' points, but they are working on 3 basic data streams, the most basic form, basically. And it feels like there is very little in the way of proactive investigation. And I think Mr. Thorpe, and I appreciate this, what Councillor Smythe said, the scales are very different, etc. But I think even when you do look at this and take this just kind of, if you look at the area, and also some of the very diligent information that's been brought before us today by Councillor Weems and Mr. Thorpe, and they're talking about previous applications as well, it just kind of feels like and this isn't a direct criticism of the planning department, it's actually work that we need to be doing as councillors. It feels like none of us are kind of working on the full thrusters that this actually requires and that's expected of us, the City Council, that is, as a whole, elected members, officers, in order to move these things forward. And so, time and time again, Chair, we're talking about the policies that we have implemented and all voted for, etc., at one point or another, that obviously does guide the planning process, but it's clear that there is a problem with it. And so what I would ask, perhaps, to be very helpful through yourself as chair, with the authority that you have, is to go and work with the relevant cabinet member, let them know that there clearly is a problem and that we need to work around addressing this. And eventually, I'm sure it is a substantial piece of work, but I think it would be welcome both by the members of this committee and by the wider council, because it would need to go to full council at some point. But it's clearly a problem that's affecting every single meeting with these applications coming forward. Also as well, I mean, I've seen so many bad HMO applications here over the past 12 years that I've been sitting on these committees, and I've never seen a planning application that's had a residents' petition of around 160 members come forward. That is a strong strength of feeling, and I know it's difficult and that there is only limited weight given to it, but it feels quite wrong. And I know that's it's a wishy-washy thing, and whether people want to take any consideration or give that any merit is obviously down to them. But it does actually, once somebody read out a comment, I think the officer that read out Councillor Weems' deputation, and he made the point about it's really disappointing, actually, because the democratic process, and we are elected to represent them, and even though we are making the decision on things that are before us, it kind of feels like these half-assed things are coming before us now, that things are being deferred, and I think that kind of really puts the emphasis on the fact that Councillor Stagg raised a really salient point about we are essentially being asked to make a decision where we're not really in possession of all the facts. I don't think the officers are also in possession of all the facts. That's not their fault, because it feels like we're in this horrible self-perpetuating groundhog mess, and it can only actually be addressed, dare I say, through an intervention from yourself and the cabinet member, then supported by the wider selection of members. And I would ask that you would consider that duly and come back to us offline to let us know that those conversations are taking place and that work could start with all of the relevant people, because I think that we really are at a point where we have to move forward with that. We can't wait around any longer. This is good. Otherwise, we're going to be sat here every single meeting, and this is going to go on and on and on. We want good quality HMOs, but clearly we do have a problem with our own policy, our HMO database, and how we do business, and that's got to change.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a helpful invitation for me or the chair to speak with the relevant officers.
Also, as well, Chair, sorry, you're really quiet. I've seen a few people comment on social media that they can't hear what you're saying.
Thank you. I shall try to speak a little louder. How's that?
Just to clarify this, am I right in thinking that the new local plan, which we're getting towards the end of the process on it, will have a policy on HMOs that will enable us to make clearer decisions in the future?
I'll just have to check on that if I can, Councillor.
And if it's not in there, may I request that we do have, as Councillor suggested, an opportunity as the Planning Committee, who's sat through so many of these somewhat disheartening applications, to discuss that and to discuss how in practice it will be applied to planning permissions.
Yeah.
And I've got a further question about the
I'm sorry, we're on comments, I think.
yeah, no, a question. We're on comments, are we?
We're on comments. If you could make it a comment.
No, it was a question. I think it's answered about the... I would have liked to have seen a plan of this extension and to see how far down the garden it extends and how much out beyond the plan that's shown on page 46. But you are assuring us, I think, that it's permitted development anyway.
That's right. If it's permitted development, as long as it meets the criteria to be permitted development, then we don't have a say in, for example, garden size remaining.
Maybe that's something else that the new local plan should raise in circumstances where that's clear, which it isn't here. But,
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Symes.
It's just an observation, really. Sorry.
We all need to be nearer the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
There are lots of young people who want to leave home who can't necessarily afford to move into a house, or people who move to the area who have a job but can't afford to buy or rent accommodation on their own. And if we can provide good quality accommodation, I think that's what we have to look at, is to get the quality of accommodation to a standard where the kind of elements of misbehaviour that most people associate with HMOs is changed, because it's not being let to whole groups of young people who just want to have a good time, so they should, but it's also let to young professional people who have no alternative but to live in a shared accommodation because they can't afford to live anywhere else. So I think we have to be very careful how we do this, and just try to raise standards, I think, is the most important thing, so that young people who want to leave home or who move here because they have a job have a good quality of accommodation shared that they can move into. So.
Well, yeah, thank you. I'm sure that's something we all agree we want to have happen. As usually, it's not the what, it's the how, isn't it? That's tricky. How do we get there? Councillor Atkins.
As much as I'd like to do a deep dive into our policy, and we have discussed this a lot of time before, I think technically this isn't really the place for it, because and it's becoming necessary for us to do this, which is frustrating, but we should be doing this in full council meetings, we should be doing this in cabinet meetings, we should be doing this in our housing decision, where the cabinet member is making the decisions in the decision meetings, and in our discussions around the local plan. So I think all of us will need to go away and engage with those, and I've made some notes, and I will be following up with the planning officers on various of the policy questions around what we could and couldn't implement as regards national guidance, and what will be possible to sustain in terms of our policies, because I think we do want to make our HMO policy more robust, and I think the reason is pictures like the deputy showed us that, unfortunately, for example, our 50-metre rule, 10% 50-metre rule, while it might be sort of fair in a sort of small microcosm, isn't taking account of the effect on a wider community, and I think that map showed that very clearly, how that area has been and is being changed. But that's a wider policy question that I don't think actually we can take into account in this application, because unfortunately that's unfair to the applicant to do so. So looking at this application on its own merits, we reached a quite strict decision with the applicant when we refused it last time. And we did so on the basis of a conservatory, a lack of conversion, in fact, that wasn't bringing the housing up to suitable standards. And I think there was a concern around lack of bathrooms as well that we didn't use in the actual refusal, but was in discussion. And this applicant has, to be fair to them, gone away and fully addressed those concerns quite extensively. They've increased the downstairs space in a much more acceptable way in terms of the use for future residents. They've improved the kitchen. They put in a downstairs WC that's separate to the bedrooms, and they appear to have en suites from what I can see on the plans. So I actually think this applicant has raised the quality of the accommodation they're providing to quite a high standard, and I think given the policies that we currently have, I'm going to recommend the officer's report in this case because I think the applicant has taken on board so much of what we want and produced a high standard HMO. And at the moment, when we are allowing HMOs and there isn't an overabundance in this area, it wouldn't be fair to this applicant do anything other than recommend the officer's report here, as much as I take on board the community objection, because it is a problem with our policies that we can't set better limits on how HMOs are going to affect the community. But I think in the end, I move the officer's report in this case because I think this one meets our policies.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. And seconded by Councillor Smythe.
That.
Okay, thank you. So, proposer, seconder, any other views? No? Okay. To the vote. As proposed. Okay, against?
That's 6-1 in favour of granting planning permission.
Thank you, Kieran. Do we wish to continue? I don't know if anybody needs a break. No? Okay, happy to continue. Okay, Helier Road. Thanks, Simon. Helier Road.
Thank you, Chairman. Next application is for residential development at 2A Helier Road in Southsea. It's the change of use of an existing building, converting it from a gym and building an extra floor above to make it a 3-storey building to provide 3 flats. We have some updates in the SMAT, Supplementary Matters Report. Perhaps I'll take you through those at the end. Please remind me if I forget. But otherwise, I'll take you through the presentation now. So Helier Road runs north-south just off Highland Road. Highland Cemetery is just to the southwest there. You can just about make it out appearing into the bottom left of the image. So we have Highland Road running east-west. You can make out the application site in red, labelled as a hall. There it is, tucked in behind the guitar centre, so it's got the grey and white render just beyond the guitar centre there. There's the guitar centre again, and the property to the right is Hurley Court, a 3-storey flatted development that backs on to the same land that the application site backs onto. So you can see Hurley Court there, just about sort of just southeast, touching the corner of the application site, and the land to the rear of both properties is a parking court and other things for Hurley Court. We'll see that relationship in a bit more detail shortly. So going along into Helier Road, there is the application property, last in use as a gym, I believe, for a number of years. And then the rest of Helier Road turns into a residential road. There's a view from the other side, so that's the main door underneath the canopy there. That is the back of the property. So I referred you to Hurley Court earlier. That's on the left, so you can see flats looking down alongside, parallel to the back of the application site, with a couple of parking spaces there, and I think it's a bin store. And then to the right hand side you can see the first property on Helier Road, which is a dwelling house. In due course we'll see some windows put on the back of the application property looking over this area. This is a slightly longer view from the east looking west, so the application property is there in the middle, background of the site, so it's just a slightly longer view, and it also shows the houses to the right-hand side again. The left-hand side was the originally submitted application, which had 2 extra stories on top of the existing 2. Officers felt that was too much, and so the application was amended, and as proposed is on the right-hand side with the mansard roof set behind the existing parapet wall to better align with the scale of accommodation in the road. In a bit more detail, there we are. So it's a conversion of the existing building with a mansard roof on top to provide 3 flats. There's the front door on the bottom left, and then 3 good-sized flats. That's the rear view we saw earlier on in the photograph, and you can see the new windows that are proposed facing east across this courtyard of the adjacent development. You can see on each window there's a very fine vertical grey shading. These are equivalent of Venetian blinds, except vertically and set solid into the window to stop you looking diagonally out into the neighbour's window in this instance, because the windows are quite close at the back. So you can see that on the left-hand side, and to the right-hand side those are staircase windows with the same privacy screen to avoid looking into the neighbour's house to the north on the right-hand side. These are picked up in the report. The ground floor, a bit small for you perhaps, if I can enlarge that. So you can make out the entrance under the canopy I pointed out earlier that takes you through into the stairs area. The plans have been amended since publication, so this area to the right of the stairs is now a bike store that's taken out of the ground floor flat to provide some dedicated bike store accommodation, because the report set out that, as previously proposed, there was 2 wall mounted racks in each flat. We felt we ought to have some better accommodation than that, and so the bike store has been shown. I'll come back to that later. And then you can see the ground floor flat, 2 bedrooms and a good size, and a new window put in at the rear there for the bedroom 2. First floor plan, similar arrangement really, except with more space because of no need for the entrance lobby and the bin store, so a bigger communal living, study, kitchen, living area. And the third floor, just giving you an indication of the mansard roof arrangement and the slight setback from the front and rear elevations to give it that proper recessive effect, the roof plan. So that's the planning application. I'll just take you through the supplementary matters. And we do have the deputy, which is the agent for the application, Mr. Buchan. Members would have noticed in the report there was a matter of bats being an old building and the potential for bats. So further works have been carried out in the last few days, and those have been assessed by the county ecologist, who is satisfied there is indeed no trace of bats from droppings or remains of food feeding detritus, but nevertheless a precautionary working method approach is recommended. So we propose to attach an informative to deal with that. The bullet points are there taking you through the various measures. Then on to the highway matters. We do have a number of objections set out in the report, which include concerns from local residents about parking, and indeed the local highways authority also have some concerns. We have reconsulted them because the application has been reduced from the 4-storey, 4 flats to 3 stories, 3 flats. So on that basis, and also to look again at the parking, we have reconsulted them. They maintain their concerns about not only parking levels for cars, but also the cycle parking provision. With respect to vehicle parking, like many parts of the city where there are permits, the number of permits issued exceed the number of spaces already. In the SMAP there on the second page, 2/3 of the way down, 1,384 permits are issued. There are 1,264 spaces available. There was a debate about whether or not the gym had dedicated on-street parking and whether or not that could be maintained with the new development. We weren't sure that was the case or could be the case, and the Highways Authority have confirmed there is no dedicated parking for the gym. We thought that would be the case, so we made it clear in the report as published we were relying simply on comparison of the existing lawful gym use and the traffic associated with that, or parking associated with that, against 3 new flats. Clearly 2 different types of use have different patterns of use, not entirely comparable, but we did feel that the overall comparison of a gym with dozens of people perhaps at its maximum use in situ at any time, and a proportion of those arriving by car would almost certainly be more than the parking demand from 3 flats. And given the very sustainable location on Highland Road there, not too far from the seafront, and all sorts of amenities and shops and so on, we didn't think there was a reason to withhold planning permission, although the Highways Authority do not support the scheme. And a similar sort of issue with respect to bike parking. As I've explained, we have improved the parking from the original proposal of wall-mounted racks in each flat, and the applicant believes in the bike store there now propose you could provide bikes for they proposed the ground floor and the top floor flat, and they still suggest a couple of wall-mounted racks in the first floor flat. We've proposed a further condition to really make sure we get the best possible option. It may be that we can't get 6 bike spaces all in that storage, but we want to make sure we get as many as we can with the most efficient arrangement, because there are all sorts of different products on the market, different arrangements, walls, ceiling, floor, etc. So we want to make absolutely sure that is maximised whilst still being usable. So we propose a condition to make sure we secure the best. It may not provide all 6 expected spaces, but we think we can achieve something pretty good, and decide also in closer consultation which flats they're allocated to. Arguably it'd be better to allocate them to the first and second floor flats, and if there's one flat that has to wheel a bike in, it's the ground floor flat. Makes perhaps a bit more sense. So we're asking members for some further debate with the applicant post-decision to make sure we get the best arrangement. But even if there aren't enough spaces per standard, we wouldn't suggest that the application is refused. That's a small negative point against all the positive points of providing new accommodation in a sustainable location and converting a reasonably attractive building with all the benefits that go with that. So we do recommend approval still, subject to the matters of SPA mitigation and the legal agreement and the extra condition and the informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Mr. Buchan, over to you.
Just to say that the additional 3rd storey that we're putting on there is only 600 millimetres above the existing roof level of the gym currently. So all we're doing is not really increasing the height of the building, and we feel that the parking spaces that currently are there, there's 110 members to the gym who will be using the parking regularly. We strongly still believe, from my client's perspective, that the gym and the guitar shop have 5 dedicated spaces for 1 hour parking for the gym. We would propose that 3 of those spaces be retained for the gym on permit only for those flats. Other than that, I've got nothing else further to say.
Thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Symes.
Yes, I'm rather concerned about the overlooking. The fixed blinds that are intended to be put in some of the flats to stop them being able to look into other people's living accommodation. What's to stop someone taking those out if they don't want them there? I find it, to have somebody actually live in a space where they feel their neighbour can look straight into their window isn't an ideal situation for anyone.
So I think we're all going to have to learn to get a little bit closer to the mic.
Sorry.
So I've been told off already. So, but let's try and get closer to the mic. Okay, Simon.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, for everyone's benefit, you were asking about the privacy issue and whether or not it was a permanent solution. So thank you. That's a pertinent question. It's the sort of thing that we ask for full details to be submitted and approved by condition, and then for those approved details to be installed as approved and maintained as approved through the lifetime of the development. So yes, they have to stay in as approved to provide that ongoing privacy for all concerned, the new occupiers and the existing ones next door. I'd also point out that the rear yard is somewhere where people go, I think, for their rubbish and parking. So there's already, from the existing residents of Hurley Court, some visibility into their own flats, so to speak, or their own neighbours. So this one is at right angles, but those fins will just direct sight out, not into neighbours' windows. So it will deal effectively. It's a neat trick that's used in other developments, Councillor.
How is this enforced and who will enforce it?
We would normally, having had the details in, we will expect, and they're required to install them as per approved and to keep them in position as per approved. Should a neighbour ring up and say we think they've taken them out or they're not working properly or something like that, we will visit and follow it up.
The condition you mentioned in respect of the cycle storage, is that already in the report or does that need to be added?
It's in the SMAT, thank you, Councillor. So it's the last bit on the right-hand column on page 2.
Is there perceived, could it be considered there's any loss in relevant immediacy in the loss of a gym in the area and its exercise facilities? It sounds like it's reasonably functioning.
It's one of those scenarios, Councillor, where we can't insist upon it remaining open, a private facility, so anyone can decide to close their shop or their gym or their art gallery or whatever it may be. So A, and B, there'll be other facilities in the area, and it's up to the market. If someone else thinks the area needs a gym, then they might want to pursue that somewhere else.
Councillor Smith.
I know that the waste bin is now inside the building. What sort of container is going to be used for that? Is it going to be one big sort of container that's going to be wheeled out and wheeled back in, or is it going to be individual bins?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just checking the details. The waste services required further details. They will need, in any event, outside of planning even, they will, I know we tend to have that as a condition, but it's my belief outside of planning in any event, they'll want to make sure that they've got the right bins for waste storage. So they haven't objected to the overall space. I suspect that our colleagues have seen the space is adequate, but they want to make sure they specify exactly what you ask about, the right bins and the right sort of configuration within that space. So I think that will go on separately in any event, Councillor.
And supplementary to that, what about fire? Is that all concealed? I know it's sort of it's going to be contained to make sure there's no risk of anybody flashing it up and danger to occupants and things sort of thing on that.
Building regulations will deal with fire matters.
And to comments? Councillor Smythe.
I'm so sorry, I've got another question. Did I see correctly that there are solar panels on the building? It's just next door, it's not on this building. Number 2.
I didn't think so, Councillor. I'm just going to check for you.
I couldn't find it, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
There is mention of solar panels.
Yeah, it's next, I think it's next door. They were worried at 4 stories that it was going to be.
We've got the usual condition, Councillor. So even if, we've had this debate before, even if they happen to show solar panels, they don't actually have to provide them when they carried out more investigations. But what they do have to do is meet the sustainable construction condition number 6, which does require the improvement in emission rates. The building regulations were tightened up a few weeks ago as well. So it's a parallel approach, if you like. The applicant says they wish to meet the BREEAM excellent level, so that's good. And I think it's a good news story for sustainability in any event, because they're reusing a solid old building rather than knocking it down, all the energy and carbon embedded and starting again. This should be a good, solid conversion and good for sustainability.
Thank you. I've just understood that there was an objection to the previous hire application, which might have affected a neighbour's solar panels, and that's hence the reference.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. The neighbour has got solar panels, and we believed that by reducing the building, as happens, would therefore reduce the effect on the neighbour.
Are we done with questions? Any comments on the application? Councillor Stagg.
I have serious concerns about the parking, as you would expect me to say. I mean, there are something like 115 more parking permits already out than there are spaces. People are driving around as it is. I get endless emails from this parking zone because people can't find anywhere to park. We can't turn around and say that the people can't have a car, but that's the obvious thing to do. I mean, it's just, well, as you know, we have far too many vehicles in the city as it is. I mean, we're oversupplied by, I think it's 1.3 cars registered to each household in the city already. Add to that commercial vehicles, and we're up to 1.5. And in a city that's got very little off-street parking, it's just a nightmare. So the parking is a problem. The road rage that results from people desperate to find somebody, people working late, coming home, finding somewhere to park, is absolutely horrendous. So I would have serious concerns about that, and I think that the Highway Authority is recommending this refused on that basis. There's also the question of the storage of the bikes. I mean, it's not really what it should be, because obviously there's very little space. So it's a major problem in my mind. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Just an observation really. If the bikes are going to go to the upper 2 floors, and that communal space is going to get quite a lot of wear and tear then, are they thinking about putting in sort of those like rails that they sometimes put in to save the sort of carpet sort of communal areas as they go up?
That'll be entirely up to them, Councillor. Yeah, you'd hope they'd just have a robust, either, raw material, concrete or whatever it may be, or whatever the material is to cover the stairs. Yeah, I'm sure they don't want some flimsy carpet. It's going to get too dirty.
Any other comments? No? I shall move the officer's recommendations. Anybody like to? Councillor Smith? Just going quick. Seconded. To the vote. For?
That's with the extra condition.
With the informative and the conditions. Yeah, thank you. You got, yeah. Okay. So the vote as recommended.
Yeah, so that's 6 in favour.
Against?
1 against.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I have to abstain.
Yes.
But it needs the recording.
You arrived late, so you weren't counted, Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Yeah, so I can't.
Yeah. We saw you coming in. Okay, thank you. The chair must still be in the dentist's chair.
It would seem so. Can I selfishly ask for a 5-minute comfort break?
Okay, I think that's probably...
Kieran, you need a smoke.
Never. Filthy habit.
5 minutes, members. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, welcome back. Shall we continue with our last three applications? We move on to Summers Road. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a residential development proposed at 5 Summers Road in the middle of Somerstown. Here is the application site. Summers Road, that's Cottage Grove running along to the south, east, west, so we're just north of Elm Grove really, between Elm Grove and Winston Churchill Avenue in the heart of Somerstown. The site has a rear access. You can see the words electricity substation. That's a shared rear yard access shared with the neighbours and also into the rear of the application site. There it is. So middle foreground, the two-storey building is the application site. It's proposed to demolish that. It's a post-war building. So it has a ground floor takeaway and a ground floor shop. And 4 flats above. The application is to demolish that particular building and erect a 5-storey building with 13 flats. You can see the scale of development in the area. Right at the bottom of the screen are some post-war 2-storey houses, and then we have 4 and 5-storey local authority blocks and some taller tower blocks dotted around the area as well. This is from the rear, so there's the bottom left is the rear courtyard, shared courtyard I mentioned. Bit of a tidy up needed to get access to the rear of the site. So the site's in this middle background there with the slightly lighter coloured flat roof. You can see 3 trees dotted around to the south of the site. They're all off-site but relatively close to the boundaries, so they've been looked at. And the neighbouring property to the left-hand side has a rear, you can see a sort of pipe running up onto the roof there. That's a rear access area to the flat there that could be used for sitting out on, so we paid attention to the amenity there. So here's the site plan. Redevelopment, you can make out in the middle of the building that the 5th floor is recessed. So it's a 4-storey building plus a recessed 5th floor, and there's the rear car park and some landscaping either side of the rear wing. Quite small plans. I don't think we've got a larger plan of the floor, so I'll zoom that in for you. That's a bit better, I hope. The front door you can make out bottom central from the road. Takes you to the stairs and a couple of the flats all the way through, or if you come in through the back with the car, there is a back door, side door on the left hand side there you can make out past some proposed and existing landscaping to get into the ground floor flats and then upstairs. And then we have similar sorts of arrangements upstairs. The rear wing is moved off the northern boundary, which is the boundary to the right hand side, as I said earlier, just to relieve the effects on the neighbouring property. We haven't had any objections from the neighbours, but nevertheless that's something we needed to look at. Here's what the development would look like. It's facing brick, zinc panelling for the roof and other more detailed materials, so mostly masonry and zinc. So you can make out the central core is recessed there between the 2 halves of the masonry elevations really, and repeated around the side. So fairly contemporary, smart design, I hope. Landscaping, there will be some landscaping opportunities dotted around the site. They've specified all the different species and shrubs, and a couple of, even a tree of appropriate size in terms of being narrow and tall growing rather than a big spreading tree. There's the site as existing. That's the takeaway on the left and the shop on the right, and further shops to the right hand side. That's the view from the south. There's the cypress tree on the left hand side that is just off site but has been looked at by the tree officer. There it is again, and just showing some of the scale of the development to the left hand side. So the application site is just to the right behind the cypress. There's a slightly longer view looking up from Cottage Grove, so it's the first building there in the middle ground with the yellow and brick. There it is looking from the north, a different scale of development dotted around. And that's from the rear, so again, we've highlighted the extent of the site. That is next door to the south, the shop and flats to the south. So 13 flats, affordable housing policy kicks in at 10, but because there are 4 existing flats, it's a net gain of 9, so policy cannot apply to that. As I said before, no public objections. Highways Authority do object on parking again, not for the bike parking, but for the car parking. The development is just a few short of the expected guidelines. There'll be 15 spaces on site. The local Highways Authority would expect 22. Again, a bit similar to the last site, given its location, a highly sustainable location in the middle of Somers Town, the city centre nearby, the train station, buses, Southsea Town Centre, the seafront, Elm Grove, Albert Grove, lots of amenities and shops and so on. So we didn't feel that the slight shortfall of parking provision, given the sustainable location, would by any means outweigh the benefits of the scheme, providing 13 flats for the city. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. We have the agent with us. Hello. Catherine, would you like to give your deputation?
Yep, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and Councillors. Thank you for the opportunity this afternoon to address you. I'm here today representing my client, Saxon Development, and as such I'm speaking in support. Since the application was submitted, the scheme has evolved, taking into consideration the concerns and comments raised throughout the consultation period. I'm very pleased to note that the majority of consultees, and indeed the case officer, have lent their support to this. The site is located in an area which has been allocated for comprehensive regeneration in the Portsmouth Plan and the support in Somers Town and North Sea, South Sea Action Plan. As the case officer identified in her report, the site lies within a perimeter block known as Site 14. The specific guidance relating to perimeter block has been taken into consideration throughout the evolution of the design. As summarised by the case officer, the design is in accordance with the policy guidance. More importantly, we believe that the development of the site is key to the kick-start of the regeneration of the area, and it can be delivered without compromising or preventing the wider redevelopment of Somers Town. The principle of the proposed development is considered acceptable and is therefore supported. On top of this, the Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The development would contribute an additional 9 residential dwellings towards the housing stock. These smaller units will be available for starter homes and young families. The development promotes economic, social and environmental sustainability. Regards to economic benefits, the construction phase will result in generation of employment across the sector. The applicant aims to employ local contractors where possible and practical, and has done so on many of the other developments around the borough. On top of this, the new residents will bring money into the local economy through spending in local shops and facilities. The development will lead to an improvement in the visual aesthetics of the local area through the incorporation of landscape features, which will soften the area and provide a pleasing atmosphere. The development will also enhance the safety of the area through providing active frontages and also the incorporation of CCTV. This creates a more socially secure atmosphere. With regards to the environmental sustainability, the site is located within easy walking distance from shops, services, facilities and good public transport. This will encourage residents to use alternative modes of transport, which reduces pollution. As part of the development, the applicant will incorporate charging points for electrical vehicles, which in turn promotes the purchase and use of these vehicles. The incorporation of landscaping increases the biodiversity value of the site, which currently is very limited. Materials that be used in the build will be sourced locally where practical. The use of PV solar panels, UPVC double glazing with low emissivity, and the use of water service appliances with flow restrictions promote sustainability further. It is noted that there is that concern has been raised with regards to the quantity of parking on site. The current arrangement provides no opportunity for parking for residents of the existing flats, nor any provision for employees or customers of the commercial unit if it was to be occupied. The proposal is therefore an improvement to that existing. The Council's parking SPD sets out that the Council may accept a lower standard if justification can be given. The Transport Statement sets out distances to local shops and facilities, demonstrating the sustainability of the location. The latest census has also been explored to assess trends of the car ownership in the locality. The data sets out that 34% of those living in the surrounding flats do not have access to a car, and only 41% own one car. It is therefore reasonable to assume that at least a third of the proposed dwellings will be occupied by persons not owning a car, and at least a further third of residents owning just one car. The proposal of one space per flat is therefore considered suitable. There is no objection with regards to the impact of the development on highway network, and there are no concerns regarding access or safety. National policy states development should only be prevented on highways grounds if there be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, of which there is none. The highways objection therefore does not justify a planning refusal. I trust that you can lend your support to Officer's recommendation, thereby granting planning permission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your deputation. Okay, members, questions? Councillor Stack.
Thank you. Did I hear that solar panels are going to be installed for producing electricity?
I'm sure I just took a note of that. Yes, that's what the applicant says. So that will be part of the condition, Councillor Stagg 13, where they'll need to submit a suite of environmental measures, and that'll be one of them then, in order to meet the stipulations.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Councillor Atkins.
Hi, could you just put up the sort of site plan of the site again, and just take us through where the car parking is going again on the site? Yeah, okay, so that existing area is kind of a tarmacked area already, so there's not really any sort of loss of green space or amenity associated with this application, is there?
That's right, I agree.
Councillor Smythe.
I'd like to follow on for that. Could you put that back up again, please? I wonder if there was room for another couple of trees, or a tree in the corner by the electricity substation. I know some people find that a minor inconvenience at certain times of the year because of parking a car under a tree, but this area is very much devoid of trees and needs more, and we ought to be establishing a high standard of, and I wondered if there wasn't an opportunity to plant down the left-hand side, the southern south by car park 8, some planting, and in the corner there, planting including a tree. I do think we've got to insist on higher standards there.
Thank you, Councillor. We could either do it informally, the applicant's here today, and we'll either informally adjust their proposals, or we could formally adjust the landscaping condition 17, because they've submitted a full scheme already. Unusually, we normally ask for details. Here we're saying approving in accordance with the scheme. So we'd have to amend that condition to say we want some further details.
It looks as if the applicant is nodding and smiling. I think really we should be insisting on higher, so if we could, that would be...
I think the agent will have heard what we've just said.
Sorry, yes. There is a landscape plan which has been submitted. I don't think it's part of the pack, but it does give further details of what we are proposing, including plants and numbers, so if that helps.
Okay, thank you. Any...
Sorry, Chairman. Yes. Thank you. It is slightly better than the site plan, Councillor Smythe. You can see there's a, if you could put the plan up again, please, Karen. There we are. So in the bottom left-hand corner, I mentioned a fastigiate growing tree. That's an oak, but it's fastigiate, so it's selected for that restricted space. It's not going to grow into a great wide oak. It's going to grow into, it will grow up more thinly. And at the north there as well, there's another tree. You can just make out on the southwest boundary, the trees are just off-site, so there's no more space for trees there. They'll be growing underneath the existing ones. So I think probably, in terms of trees, they've got what they can get in, and then it's supplemented with shrubs and other lower plants, Councillor. So I think probably, hence the fact that we're happy with it already and it's been seen by the landscape architect, I think that's probably a good scheme as it is.
Certainly looks very encouraging. What I'm seeing is, am I seeing some sort of couple of trees or bushes on the top triangle and then 1, 2, 3 down the landscaped area down on the north? Is that right? I really think it's good to be insisting on those. Thank you.
I'm just curious to know what does it say, the detail, what it says about the hedgerow on the bottom of that, because it looks like quite a good landscape plan, actually.
Yeah, now you're testing my species and so on. Viburnum, hydrangea, verbena, sedum, heuchera. The sorts of, some of those are evergreen, so they're nice at this time of year as well, with some winter flowers, as well as cotoneaster, lonicera, etc. So I think it's a good mix of trees and shrubs and flowers.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
I think this proposal looks as if it replaces something that is not beautiful with something significantly better, and therefore I would happily propose the officer recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously in some areas of the city we would be looking to enforce our parking standards to the full amount, but I think in this particular location, given the type of accommodation, 1 parking space per flat is a reasonable compromise, given the rest of the plan being good and providing regeneration in an area that does need it. So I'm happy to second the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Shall we move the recommendation? Those in favour?
That's unanimous approval.
And I think there was a commitment from the developers for a bit of social value contribution in the development. I think I heard that.
Sorry, for?
A little social value contribution.
A social value, yes. Yeah.
I trust that's captured in the report appropriately.
Yes, I know. We're joined by the chair. So if you can give us a couple of minutes to move around. Thank you.
Can somebody give me a test shower, as it were?
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear us?
Can you try again, please, Leader?
Hello, hello, hello. If the worst comes to the worst, I could sing.
No, that's fine. Okay.
It might clear the building.
Okay, everybody. First of all, enormously grateful to Councillor Atwell for sitting in for me. Comes to something when you prefer the dentist and the planning committee. Anyway, there we are. So, no, enormously great, because he has not been well, and it shows his commitment to his duties to show up when he's been feeling poorly. Okay, so I understand we're on item number 6, is that correct? Okay. Kieran, anything to say? I've got no interest to declare, not that I'm aware of. And you're doing this right? Okay, let's go then.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 78 Stubbington Avenue for the change of use from a C3 dwelling house to either Class C dwelling house or C4 small HMO. That's the property highlighted in red up there in the middle of the city. So it is, let's see, the second one in from the side road. With the dormer there. There's the HMO count. Including this application, the percentage would be 3.77, well below the 10% for a balanced community. Existing floor plans, fairly normal for a C3 property with the roof accommodation there. Proposal is to convert those and provide up to 6 bedrooms, of course, for a C4 property or C3. No objections from neighbours. Councillor Swan has objected on matters of community spirit, community balance, I should say, medical services, noise, waste, rubbish, the HMO database and parking. As I say, the 10% rule is complied with. Here are some photographs within the site, various aspects of the building there, downstairs, moving on into upstairs. And lastly, members will have seen the schedule of accommodation. Since all the bedrooms are more than 10 square metres, the shared communal space of 23 square metres would meet the standard of 22, but they also actually have a study as well at 13.27 square metres. Along with the en-suites for the bedrooms, officers are satisfied the internal living accommodation is suitable. Thank you.
All right. So apart from the representation by Councillor Swan, there's no other deputations as far as I understand? No. There's nothing else? No other deputations or anything like that, just to be certain? No, good. Okay. Yes, sir, I beg your pardon. I haven't got my green sheets in front of here. They're called the SMATs, so I thought I'd better make sure. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. It's another HMO. It's also very close to Oriel Road. It's another HMO that's another overdevelopment, and I'm getting more and more concerned as I sit in these planning meetings with the way that the councillors in this room are representing its own residents. It's very obvious that the planning department should be assessing applications against the planning policies that you have agreed. They are not assessing against the planning policies. They're assessing against their own interpretations of what the planning inspectorate would say. We've just seen an application where the parking standard was failed by 100% and Highways was very clear on the issue, and even that, you dismiss all HMOs on grounds of parking, even though you know that the standard's completely wrong, and even when the property is so out of compliance, you allow a report to be presented that says that it's acceptable and that it should be approved without questioning it, I just don't understand what's the point of having planning policies if you're not going to stand by the ones that you've written. In regards specifically to this application, there's so many issues about HMOs, but the one that I was going to cover on this is the environment, because that's something that you have to take into consideration. To answer some of the questions earlier, you also have to take in crime, because that's a material thing, hence why it came up in St Chad's, which the chairman wasn't clear. And I'm very glad that the city lawyer or planning representative has said that the plans have to be in accordance with as they're being submitted, because I'm going to send a list of about 40 HMOs to the Planning Enforcement Department after that clarification. So that was a bit of a surprise that came out. The last deputation that I did, there are a lot of questions about what I raised, but my inability to have a right to reply meant that they were misinterpreted or misconstrued or answered incorrectly. In regards to the extension in the last property being before 1948 or afterwards, I've got clear photos of the property which show the join lines of where the extensions were. You can see the differences in bricks. In terms of interpreting my drawing and plans of the surrounding area, that was very clear. I knew what that was. I drew a map of the area, a map of the community, and you guys look at something smaller than a football pitch, which just isn't acceptable. What I was going to say about the environment is that all of these houses are built pre-1948, which is why you need to limit permitted development to have any control over this city. But that also means that they don't have any building standards or building controls. Every single person in this room can turn their house into a HMO tomorrow if they get planning permission without doing any building work at all to it. So that means all of a sudden building control is being transferred to the planning department, because there is no requirement to get building control when you don't make any structural modifications to the house. What you've got here is you've got a roof extension which will have very limited thermal properties. It won't have the insulation space. You've got no soundproofing between each wall and the neighbouring properties. You've got, effectively, if this was the house next to you, you're now installing a toilet onto party walls in the living room, the dining room, each of the bedrooms, and two in the loft. And you're telling me that this doesn't have increased noise and increased pollution over the equivalent family dwelling. It's just not believable to anyone with any form of common sense. I would plead on you to seriously overhaul the HMO policy, and if you can't do something quickly, then you should really think about doing what Councillor Benedict's one suggests and having a pause on this until you've got a grip with the policy. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Mr. Thorpe. Officers, anything in reply? I mean, Kieran, Mr. Thorpe raised the permitted development should not be applicable to was it pre or post 1940s, Mr. Thorpe? Because, I mean, that would take a change in the law, wouldn't it, in Parliament?
But Mr. Thorpe was responding to, I didn't engage with the substance of any of his arguments on the previous application. I simply read out the definition of original from the permitted development order, and I'd refer Mr. Thorpe to read that again and draw conclusions by perhaps speaking to others and doing further research. I can't speak to particular properties in Portsmouth. I'm sure there'll be some that have had extensions after 1948. There'll be some that have had them before. I just can't go into hypotheticals and expect to give quality answers, I'm afraid. I can only state what the rules are and seek to engage with members of the public to explain what the rules are. That's my remit, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Kieran. Mr. Turner, anything you want to respond to from Mr. Thorpe's deputation? I think
Mr. Thorpe, I know, has spoken to different officers, enforcement officers, planning officers. Be happy to do so again to tidy up an understanding of different aspects of the planning system, what can and can't be taken into account, balance. Not everything is black and white, etc., etc. So, be happy to do that further with Mr. Thorpe.
All right, Mr. Thorpe, you got an invitation there, which I think we've extended to you before to talk to the planning officers. Any ideas how to tidy up or make even tighter the rules that we have about HMOs and the 10%, so-called 10% rule, I'd be glad to hear about it. We've been over and over and over and over it again and again and again to try and make it fit for purpose. And I know there are some councillors who say we should just stop it and chuck it out. Well, if we do that, it becomes a free-for-all for all speculators. There'd be very little control, as in so many other councils across the in England and Wales. It is actually one of the strongest policies in England and Wales here in Portsmouth. So the 10% rules, 10% rule does safeguard a lot of people. And then we've put in the no more than three in a row, and we've done other things which the officers would be very happy to talk to you about. If you have any ideas at all on how we can tighten it up, we're very open and willing to listen and see what might be done. Members, any questions, members of the officers? Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. I'm greatly sympathy for what Mr. Thorpe has said. I think we probably all do. But I would find it useful, Mr. Turner, if you could tell us in terms of what the national policy is and what ability we have to turn down HMOs legally, so that there is a chance to sustain them if the developer appeals.
There's no national policy as such apart from permitted development rules. So we have our local policy in the local plan, PCS 19 I think it is, and the SPD. So the main strands of that, of course, are the 10% rule to try and maintain balanced communities and not an overbalance or concentration of HMOs in any particular area. And then the merits of each particular application in terms of layout, in particular size of accommodation and layout, and are we happy with that? We've got size standards set out, and then there's a slightly more subjective discussion that we have in this committee about the layout of a property as well as its size standards. So we have the ability to determine applications, Councillor, in accordance with our policies, and some are approved, some are refused.
Some could my understanding of national planning policy is the law says there's presumption in favour of people being able to get planning applications through unless there is a reason to say no. Is that correct?
Oh yes, there is that presumption, yes, indeed. Yeah.
And secondly, could you tell me of authorities who've successfully got it a lower percentage than 10% for being able to stop HMOs in an area?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't know.
It would be very helpful for us to know.
I think Southampton is 20%.
Which I think is higher than 10%.
Yes, it may have come down to 15% recently, but I've seen 15% here and there.
Okay, but it would be helpful to know if there are other authorities that have been successful about getting a lower figure than 10% in. Yes, and that, because we can always refine our policies. And my understanding is that many councils do not have a policy at all about HMOs, so that people can convert their houses to HMOs with no planning permission at all. They can just do it. But we are unusual in that we have insisted through a Article 4, Article 4 something or other, Kieran will tell me exactly what it was, that we insist that people ask for planning permission, so we are stricter than most.
Yes, Councillor, it's an Article 4 direction, so it's worth pointing out that in most places in England you can go from a C3 use class to a C4 use class without planning permission. That is permitted development. The Secretary of State has deemed it expedient for people to just move straight to that use class.
Expedient means okay?
Yes, indeed. It's in the sort of Portsmouth bubble, because this authority is used to seeing C3 to C4 come before the planning committee. I think perhaps we lose sight of that sometimes, but it's something to appreciate as wider context.
Kieran, thank you very much.
So very quickly then, I've got that. Come to you, Councillor Smythe, in just a minute.
It isn't exactly a question.
I'll be one moment, Madam, if that's all right, Councillor. I beg your pardon. So our reason to say no is the 10% rule and the room sizes and all the other national guidelines around that. So that is our reason to say no. I think we've gone over that ground again and again and again and again. But it doesn't harm to remind people we've got one of the most tight policies in England and Wales. Councillor Smythe, you've got a question.
I'll phrase this as a question, but it isn't really a question. It's just that, Chairman and Councillor Jackson, we have just sort of decided earlier that we should, this planning committee, because it's been done by the previous one, should have an opportunity to discuss the new local plan provisions when it comes to our new policy on HMOs, and if there's anything else we can do, including comparisons with other areas. Just to say that we already did have quite a discussion about that, and that this planning committee would like to have the opportunity to discuss it with the local plan team.
All right, so that's been clear. I hope if when that's arranged...
The question could be, does everybody else agree?
Yes, yeah, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. And the thing is, when that's arranged, we need people to show up. You know, it's not like the pre-agenda, no one's showing up at the moment. We need people to show up if we make these arrangements, because the officer's time is important and expensive. I think then Councillor Smith, did you wanted to ask a question? I beg your pardon?
Sorry, Chair, it was just to back up on what's...
So we'll make that opportunity available to the Planning Committee, and of course we've all got the same opportunity to do, make comments as we see fit to the local plan via groups and via ourselves. Councillor New. Oh, you're okay. Anybody else wanted to ask? Sorry, Councillor Atkins.
Quite right, Chair. In this floor plan, it's a little different to what we commonly see. We've got what almost looks like a separate kitchen and a separate room, but they're just defining the separate room as a study and the kitchen area is communal space. Are there any kind of definitions of when something counts as communal space? It may not matter on this one in terms of size. Yeah, this looks almost to me like a separate kitchen and dining room. I think probably it would still meet space standards looking at them on that basis, but how do we determine whether that's communal space or a separate kitchen and dining room?
Thank you, Councillor. Well, yes, I mean, it's a question of labelling. What is he, I think, suggested what do people mean by what is a study or a living room or a dining room? But it's clearly a shared room. It's clearly not a bedroom. And the overall permission, if granted today, would limit the property to 6. And we return to Mr. Thorpe's question about the drawings and so on, and in accordance with the approved drawings, if it is approved.
So the communal space, which if you read on page 87, may or may not meet the required standard, but of course we have rejected or refused planning applications on these grounds before, but then the planning inspector has mainly come back and said no, because of all the other rooms are over provided for, that you should have allowed this. So we have to be careful to a degree, but we have really pushed it over and over again. The only other thing I wanted to mention, come back to Councillor Swan's representations. He says in there that he wants it might be wise to halt all HMO applications until the HMO database be reviewed. Well, I got told off in the full council by his leader for not going fast enough with applications, and if we did that, of course, applications would then start to fall behind even further. But we have done it, and then the committee, it was with Councillor Jones before when she was here with us. We all agreed that we had suspended the HMO data. We had begun to bring all the HMOs to the council. We had officers looking at the database, but we agreed that we should start to bring HMO applications back. Give the officers their delegated powers back, which has happened. So I don't see how we can just keep stop-starting with these things. And we have sufficient information here today to make a decision on this, I suspect. Members, any more questions? Members, any comments?
Well, Chair, I don't see just a defendable reason in this report to turn this planning application down. I think if we did, then my understanding is that
we would go to appeal and that we'd have very little chance of being able to sustain that, and therefore I can't see a reason here. Sometimes there's a space standard reason, sometimes there's the 10% reason, but this gets through on both of those, and therefore I cannot see a justifiable reason why we can withhold planning permission on this. I don't like them, I don't like HMOs, but I cannot find a legal reason to turn this down, so it is with regret that I'm sorry I would say that I will recommend approval. And following the officer's recommendation.
Right, anyone want to second that? Councillor Smythe, thank you. I was going to say something else, obviously not very important. Members, well, that's it then. Anybody else want to add any comments? The only thing I would say to members, before we go to the vote, we give Mr Turner the opportunity to come back again, is that we have driven up the standards of HMOs in this city enormously. You see some of the pictures and so on that come up to date, very different from the things that we used to see, a sink unit with inbuilt electric rings, for example, if I remember rightly. I'm sure you were there on that one, Councillor New. It was pretty appalling, some of the stuff we've seen, I think you've dealt with one today where we forced the conservatory to be built properly, or is that coming up next? There was previously, so, there's a lot to be pleased about with. Okay, so we're going to, Councillor Atkins.
I just wanted to make a quick comment just on the size standards. I think I'm kind of echoing what you said, that we have driven up HMO standards quite a lot with the way that we look at it, because we do go into our guidance, which standards from HMO give us the room size calculation. It does go on to say that the outcome of the calculations is not exclusively used to determine required space sizes. A consideration needs to be given to the shape, room utility of the layout, where a separate utility area is used to house fixed equipment, for example, a washing machine, dryer, dishwasher. There is no restricted access to this space that is considered to be contributing to the overall communal space, and it's expected that a room retains its integrity and can fulfil its purpose. So we do, when we think that room layouts are damaging to the amenity of the future residents, and that's a relevant consideration, we do turn these things down to drive up standards, and we have been successful at times with that. This particular one is a slightly funny layout, but I can't see any obvious reason why it restricts the use of the rooms, actually, or that there's any problem with the layout here, or that there is any huge problem with the occupancy by future residents. I'm not sure I'm completely happy with it, but I'm not minded to refuse it.
All right then, everyone's had a go that want to say something. All those in Councillor New.
Sorry, I wasn't going to speak, Chair, but you did touch on some comments, so I just thought I'd add to that. Just really on the back of some comments that I'd said previously in today's meeting on a different application when Councillor Atwell was in the Chair. I think you're right, actually, previously, when we did have some delegated authority to officers, I actually think that system worked quite well around this. And one of the things that I was, the point I was making earlier is, I think that with all of certainly the recent meetings that we've had of the planning committee, feels like we keep going around the houses on lots of things, and I think all of us probably share the same kind of aspiration. And so one of the things that I'd ask Councillor Atwell is, perhaps through you and the relevant cabinet member and with the work with the local plan, is that we could look to address some of the things that clearly don't feel quite right, etc. Because I think you're right, the aspiration to drive up high quality HMOs, I think is what we all want, and it's the vision that we all share, and something we can all get behind, which will be amazing. But also as well, I just think that if we can improve the process as well, I would be in favour of things like delegated authority, if we could reach some sort of consensus, I suppose, really, on those things, and I think it would be a positive way forward.
Sure, we'll have a get-together, the planning committee together with officers, and see what can be improved. Councillor Furniture, okay, all right. Okay. All right, everybody, lot was aired there. All those in favour of the application, please. Oh, Mr Turner, did you want to say anything further? Okay. All those in favour of the application, please show. That's all except one. Yes, I'm in favour, yes. Okay, and any against or abstaining? Thank you, Councillor New. So we're on now then to the next item, which is number 7.
Planning permission was granted.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Are we there then? That's it. That's the end of the meeting then, I take it. Oh, all right. Look, Burnham Grove, that's the one I said, item 7.
One more item.
I thought Kieran said that planning permission had been granted.
Well, he was very fast. He granted planning permission on 7 Burnham Grove before we started discussing it.
Oh, I see. That's what I thought happened. I thought you discussed it earlier on in the meeting for some reason. All right. So we're at item number 7 then, 125 Laburnum Grove. Mr. Turner, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So Mr. Thorpe is a deputy objecting, and we have certainly the applicant and I think the agent, and I think the applicant here as well to speak. So I'll just take you through the application. 125 Laburnum Grove, a change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to a sui generis large HMO for 7 persons. There's the application property behind the tree there, or next to the tree, to the left of the tree, in the middle of the city, south-facing property. It's a conversion, so the door is on the side of the property there, and various reconfigurations internally to provide the 7 bedrooms. 2 of them there at the ground floor, if you can see, before you go down and into the rear of the house where it opens up into a dining, sitting and kitchen communal space. First floor plans, again, various configurations, including with en-suites to provide bedrooms on the 3 bedrooms there. And in the second floor, converting it from a loft by putting the stairs in into usable living accommodation for 2 more bedrooms with en-suites. Elevations unchanged essentially. Photographs of the bedrooms on the ground floor, bedroom 1 at the front there, bedroom 2 in the middle of the house. On the first floor, bedroom 3 at the front, 4 and 5 towards the rear, and upstairs converting that loft space into bedrooms, 2 more, 6 and 7. And then back downstairs to the communal space. That's the on the left-hand side, the rear of the communal space, and then on the right-hand side, looking down the sitting area, dining area, down into the kitchen, and the back door is on the left-hand side, just to the left of that clock. So it's an application for a large HMO, 7 persons, has 5 objections, parking, numbers of HMOs, questioning the HMO data, and the use of permitted development rights. In terms of the balance of the local community, there are 2 HMOs within the 50-metre radius. That's 3.3%. Adding this one would take it to 5.1%, still below the 10% policy. In respect of sizes of rooms, the rooms are a good size. You've seen most of them, even the attic rooms, even with headspace for lower ceilings in places. And then there is a good-sized lounge, kitchen, dining room, which also meets the standard. So space standards, and indeed, as touched on just a few minutes ago, the configuration of the rooms, the usability of the rooms as well, also believed to be acceptable to officers. So those being the main points, it's recommended for approval.
All right, thanks, Mr. Turner. Mr. Thorpe, you've got 6 minutes, sir.
I don't think I'm going to use my full 6 minutes, to be honest. I'm just really using this as a right to reply, which a deputy never normally gets. This is yet another cramming in as many bedrooms into a property, removing a family home from the housing stock with no policy to replace it. Example. I just wanted to reply to what Councillor Vernon Jackson said, really. He claims that Portsmouth is brilliant for its HMO strictness and policy. I've read 6 city HMOs, and I would say yours is the 4th or 5th strongest of all of them. And the reason that I say that is four of the 6 cities have prohibited permitted development, so they've already got a better control than Portsmouth. So if you want action 1 that this council should do, it should ban permitted development from C3 and C4 houses, which it's entitled to do. If we go on to other issues to do with HMOs, we're talking about the 50 square metre circle. We all know that doesn't work, it's not large enough. If we talk about Southampton's policy, which I heard the chairman bring up, I believe it has now dropped it to 10%, but it also has other policies. For example, any area that's over 85% can go above 85%, i.e. they've given up and they've lost control, which actually isn't that stupid a policy. And in terms of the area, they ask the developer to define the 50 square metres. They don't say it's 50 square metres, because when you do this 50 square metres, because it's an arbitrary value, when you do it at a house at the bottom of Oriel Road, half the circle is taken up by London Road, because of the road taking up 2/3 of the width of the circle. So really, you've got to have a policy review. And no one's actually against HMOs. I would allow every house to be converted to HMOs if the scale and size of the development were controlled. The trouble is, once you allow a HMO, the scale and the size loses control. If they were using a 3-bedroom house as a 3-bedroom HMO, the residents would not have any grounds to concern. The trouble is, you're putting in 7 people with different objectives in life, different ages, different outlooks, different prospects, and you're putting them into a tiny space with limited communal areas, and then you're wondering why residents are concerned about social problems and crime problems. You've admitted in previous reports, admittedly you're very selective on the reports, that actually the social issues are 10 times greater in HMOs over C3 and C4 thing. And I really would like you as the councillors to work with the officers to present these HMOs in a fair and reasonable way. If we take flat conversions as an example and we look at the 4 that are on the agenda, I flagged it up as 20% in Oriel Road. The officers chose to look at the 2 buildings around it. If you look at another report, they've looked at every flat within the thing, and then they've stated that it's only because it's 5%. And what you'll find is that the case officers seem to be choosing the examples in the best way to support the applicant, not to fairly and objectively review every application that comes forwards. It's really important that these reports are written in a consistent way with a consistent review policy. And it's clear if you read what's in front of you and you take flat conversions, parking, and the social issues, this isn't occurring. And that's all that I've got to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Very quickly looking online, it looks like Birmingham and Bristol and Brighton all have the same sorts of issues that you're describing, but none of them have stopped doing HMOs. So I've had a quick look at those. It's the same sort of issues that we're debating all the time here. Mr. Turner, did you want to reply to anything raised by Mr. Thorpe?
Can I have a point of clarification?
Sure, go ahead, Councillor.
I thought it was a 50-metre radius, not 50 square metres, so therefore the outer limit would be that circle drawn around, so there wouldn't be room for choosing to put things in or out. Am I right?
That's right, and we took this to the planning inspector because originally, and we said it over and over again, we took it, some people wanted to do it on street, by the length down the whole of the street. The planning inspector rejected that, not the city council. That was city council's preferred option, and then we had to have an agreement with him or her, and the planning inspector said a 50 metres radius. So we've been there with this, and but we can talk about it again, and if there's any chance of changing it, we're happy to look at it if it improves situations and doesn't make things worse for people. Like I say, it's interesting to hear what Ms. Thorpe says about Southampton, and they've given up in areas where it's 85%, but I don't think people in the East St Thomas Residence Forum would want us to give up quite like that and just let them all go over to HMOs. I think they'd come down around our heads very hard indeed. So I don't think we'd go in there. Anybody else on this particular application? Mr. Turner, anything else? Councillor Atkins, a question?
Yeah, I just, I wasn't able to, I think you confirmed in what you said, so just to check, the upstairs bedrooms are, the sizes of the bedrooms is bettering the floor space where there's sufficient headroom, isn't there? Just because we've hit that once before, because they sound quite large, the two top bedrooms, but on the plan where the headroom is shown as sort of, it's kind of halfway across the bedroom doesn't look anywhere near as big, so I'm just surprised that they reached that size, and I can't quite see the numbers on the plans in order to check myself.
Yes, Councillor, thank you. It's helpful for everyone to hear. The nationally described standards require 1.5 metres ceiling height, only that area that is 1.5 metres or taller, so we don't include lower areas. So the figures given are for the 1.5 metre ceiling height plus. So the rooms are actually bigger than stipulated where there is a sloping ceiling.
So I've just taken the time now. I just looked at Brighton, and the new regulations there will prevent family homes from being sandwiched between two HMOs and prevent 3 properties in a row from being turned into a shared house. Where did they get that from? They got it from Portsmouth. Same with Southampton. You know, where did they get their 10% rule from? They got it from Portsmouth. Everybody's watching what Portsmouth does and tightens up according to what Portsmouth does. So we should be pleased, not proud, but pleased that we are ahead of the curve here. No doubt lots of others will be looking at us. At the same time, also need to point out that HMOs, certainly the one we've just seen, are forgive me for saying, but there just isn't enough housing in this country. That's why we're having to face 17,700 new homes in our city, and the HMOs are symptomatic of the fact there's just not enough housing around for young people to buy their own homes or to rent their own homes, so they go into shared housing because it is affordable to them. So we see police officers, nurses, firemen, who aren't exactly on high wages, also moving into HMOs.
Councillor?
Beg your pardon, who's called?
Sorry, the applicant hasn't made his deputation yet.
He said he did just now. Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry. Yeah, sorry, we're getting this debate, so I do beg your pardon, but this is probably music to your ears, but go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, members. Pleasure to be with you once again. Thanks first to Simon in particular, the Planning Department, for helping bring this one to you. It has been a bit of a long time coming, but we're here now. Just for a point of assistance, really, there are about 50 authorities in England that choose to control HMOs through an Article 4. 10% is bang on the industry standard. There isn't an authority that's actually gone or dared to go below 10% or been able to justify it. From a policy point of view then, because I'm going to let my client obviously speak on quality, it's paras 60 and 61 to assist Councillor Bernard Jackson in the MPPF that state that HMOs form an important part of housing land supply, and that's reflected in your own SPD. The SPD that you have, to be fair, is very well supported at Appeal. I was one of the first consultants to help engage with that process many years ago, and the 10% works. The RUG report from 2018, University of York, does help provide some context to the effect of HMOs. And what it concluded is HMOs on their own don't significantly affect communities or surrounding areas. It is how those HMOs are managed that's the effect. Now, that's important because obviously that supports what your officers are saying in terms of how this HMO is compliant with your own policies. There's been some comment about the Planning Inspectorate over the course of today and how the Planning Inspectorate is guiding applications. It is appropriate that the local planning authority apply sufficient weight to decisions it's received from the Planning Inspectorate as the higher authority. It is also appropriate for the planning authority to come up with its own view on the matter in accordance with its own policies. In terms of car parking, great play has been made of that today. I just want to rehearse and remind that the MPPF sets out the government's thrust away from reliance on the private car and towards more sustainable modes of transport. Now, Portsmouth is one of the most sustainable cities in the UK. We rival London, specifically North London, in terms of levels of sustainability, in terms of access to shops, services and other utilities that people need and want in their daily lives. So it's right and proper for your planning authority, for your highways officers to take the same view. Finally, I just want to repeat what we've heard Councillor New and Councillor Symes say earlier today. This authority wants a high quality HMO. That's what it desires. What my client is presenting for you, and I hope they'll go through in a couple of seconds, is a high quality top standard HMO suitable for 7 people. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Scott, go ahead.
Thank you. It's actually Mr. Baker. Mr. Scott couldn't make it today. Dear members and Chair, firstly thank you for the opportunity to speak in favour of this planning proposal as one of the owners of 125 Laburnum Grove in the North End. You've already heard from John talking about the specifics of why it should pass on policy grounds, so I'm not going to repeat this. I'd like to briefly share with you why we look to develop not only this house but others into shared homes. There's a huge need for homes for people between the ages of 18 to 35, and this age group are much less likely to buy properties. They are therefore looking for affordable options, which is where shared housing comes in. Historically, it has been a shambles, with old school and rogue landlords cramming people into housing for years and years. This is not the way for people to live, and to be honest, is not the way landlords should be doing business. Creating homes is about creating safe spaces for people to live in and spaces that the occupants can enjoy. I began investing in shared homes back in 2015 in the northwest of England with my parents, and very quickly saw the poor quality of rooms firsthand when we were researching. I instantly knew that quality needed to be at the forefront of every shared house we created. The HMO market has to evolve to be relevant for today's tenants. This understanding of what properties want, of what tenants want and what they need grew as we created more and started managing these properties. We wanted to ensure that every project we did was better than the last. 7 years later, we are now well versed in this, and since moving to the south coast, we chose Portsmouth as an area where we could have a positive impact. We can see that there are too many HMOs out there in Portsmouth of a poor standard, and in order to discourage the landlords of these properties from continuing to run, they need good quality competition to attract the tenants away and make their business models unviable. This will in turn either mean they upgrade or sell, increasing the likelihood of some of these quite often smaller properties ending back in family ownership as well. Both outcomes which are beneficial for the residents of Portsmouth. We now call our properties co-living properties, as our number one goal is to ensure the housemates have an amazing living experience through not just their own private space, but the space that they could share with others. Building community is one of our core values, and our properties allow our housemates to do this. At the heart of every shared house we create are 3 key elements: high quality design, space and service. Choosing the right properties with the right amount of space enables us to design them to be user-friendly, inspiring and a space where a housemate feels comfortable to stay a long time. We manage our properties under the Co-Home banner to give us uniform high levels of service across the properties we manage in the UK. It also allows us to continue our quest to build communities and help the housemates to assimilate into their local community through outreach and partnerships with local small business. By approving schemes like this one in front of you today, we can gradually push the lower quality and illegal HMOs out of the market by attracting tenants away from those houses and towards better quality options. Despite the conversations here earlier, I do applaud Portsmouth City Council in its planning policies, which do help to manage the location and quality of new HMOs, especially when compared with most councils in the UK that I am aware of. I'm also heartened by conversations here today which show the appetite for policy changes to encourage high quality shared living. Let's not forget our responsibility to house these young professionals and give them better housing options. 125 Laburnum Grove is one of these better options, which passes and even surpasses policy. Therefore, the only question to ask today is, do we want shared accommodation like this in Portsmouth? I urge you to answer yes. Thank you very much.
Okay then, Mr. Turner, anything you wanted to come back on? Kieran, anything? No. Okay, members' questions then. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
It was interesting to see the pictures. So presumably the work's already been done, and this is retrospective. And I think it is significantly better than many HMOs that I've seen in the city, but my concern would be that every single room had a double bed. But this is an application for 7 bedrooms for 7 people, not for 7 bedrooms for 14 people. How are we able to make sure there is a condition that this is for 7 people only? Now, I think probably in terms of marketing that might work well for them, but because we have to think about the building, not who the owners are, and then maybe a future owner who does different things. So can I ask Kieran how we can have a condition that states that this must only be 1 resident per room?
I'll let the planning officer speak to the merits that might support such a condition or not.
Thank you, Councillor. This is a pertinent question. In this case, the accommodation is sizable, so I don't think we'd have to recalculate whether or not more than 7 could accommodate it, but I'm pretty sure just from looking at it they could. But the licence would control that, basically, so that's where the control would be. Whether or not there are double beds or single beds is a matter of choice. It's the control by licence.
Okay, Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
I saw the owner nodding when I said this. I'm wondering whether they would be happy with a condition that says this is for 7 people living in it maximum.
To be fair, we don't put couples in because couples in shared houses cause kind of issues. So generally, we generally go for single occupancy within properties. We wouldn't be putting couples in.
So can I ask again, would you be happy if we added a condition that said only...
Could you, through the chair...
Oh, sorry, through you, Chair.
Okay, we don't normally have this sort of conversation, but since it is pertinent right now, I'll allow him to reply because we've engaged in the conversation. Mr. Baker. Go ahead, Mr. Baker.
So it's my first time in committee, so I'm not entirely sure how these things go. Yes, I am happy with a condition for 7 occupants. I believe it states 7 people in the planning application anyway, so I believe it would be implied.
Indeed, it's implied. And because you've had a go, Mr. Thorpe, is there anything you want to say about that? Just to make sure that, you go away from here, I think you've had a fair shout.
To be honest, what the person presented seemed perfectly reasonable. And it's interesting that he basically says what we all know, which is actually the management that's the issue of the HMOs in a lot of cases. I don't really have anything to add other than I think an occupancy limit of 7 within the planning conditions would be perfect. What will actually happen in reality, and we know how it's enforced, means that actually the requirement's a waste of time. But I would love to see it put in at least. And then when they do put 14 people in, we can at least have a go against the planning policy, but you'll find you'll lose at appeal.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. And of course, we do know that when residents report these breaches of the planning permission, that they do get investigated. Mr. Turner?
Thank you, Chairman. As I alluded to earlier, I think the accommodation could easily accommodate more than 7 people and still be in accordance with your policy. Its combined living space is 34 square metres, which is the policy for 6 or more persons. The bedrooms are all of a good size, so it can definitely accommodate more than 7. So we don't have an actual planning reason to restrict it. As I say, I think licensing would pick it up.
Yeah, I know you can't guarantee these things, but listening to this particular application this morning, it seems to me that, they want people in there who are going to pay a decent rent, a good rent, and if those people felt that they'd been overcrowded, they'd move out to somewhere better. So, market forces are also at play here. Anybody else got anything they want to ask by way of a question? Then we go to comments. Councillor Atkins.
Looking at the property, the Laburnum Grove obviously is a difficult place for parking, and I know this meets the standard in the sense it's not more than a family home. But most of the houses along that row actually have a car parked on the forecourt, so do provide a single parking space. Is that not possible with this application? Was it investigated at all?
I think it has parking on the front forecourt.
The Highways Authority says like for like, if I remember rightly.
As well.
Yeah. So it's like for like, Councillor Atkins, according to the Highways Authority, and they do object. They're very vociferous objecting when things need objecting to.
It effectively says in the report that this is no parking provision application, when I think it actually might be capable of providing one, and it may even be providing one. That's what I was kind of asking.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much for raising that. Councillor Stagg, a question?
It's a comment on that. There is a minimum dimensions for parking on the forecourts on all those roads, because you've got to be able to get the car negotiated in and out, so you've got to have considerable depth.
Very helpful to have your representation here. Thank you very much. Members, we've moved into comments clearly. Anybody got any more comments? Councillor New.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose really, just adding to the conversations that we've already had today, it's nice to kind of be finishing on this is the type of HMO I think that we've all been looking forward to seeing, and I think some of the points that have been made today at committee about it will be, HMOs, we're not against them, they're not going away clearly, but I do think it is that these higher standard ones that will drive out some of the bad ones that we absolutely hate. So, I really welcome this. I think it's great, and I really personally think that the size of the rooms are really very good. If you were somebody, a young professional or whatever, that's exactly the sort of accommodation you're going to be looking at.
You're right, and we have seen some similar examples like this over the last few years. The trouble seems to come when people try to convert 2 ups and 2 downs, and then they go backwards, upwards, outwards and sideways, and it looks like completely inappropriate. And the rooms are so small anyway. That's where we seem to have the most trouble. Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
I'm happy to propose the officer recommendation with...
Can I just comment on that before you propose the motion?
Okay.
I think you need to clarify as you propose your motion whether or not you're carrying forward your proposed condition to limit it to 7 occupants.
I was about to say so before you cut me off in my prime, Kieran.
And as you do so, you also need to articulate your planning reason for doing so, because you've heard advice from Simon Turner advising you not to do it. So we need to hear from you why you think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. So I want to propose the officer recommendation of approval, but with a condition which the applicant has said they're happy to accept, of limiting it to 7 individuals as in their planning application, because to go above that number would be an overdevelopment of the site and potentially cause significant problems to their neighbours.
Well, I'm happy to second that. It seems reasonable. And
Before you go to the vote on it, could we actually just get a form of words written up between me and the planning officer? If we could take 5 minutes to adjourn, that should do that.
Grateful.
Okay.
Thank you very much
I need
indeed.
to be off at 1:45.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I need to go now because I've got a hospital appointment at 2. I'm already
So could we just... You know the form of what we want, Kieran?
I'll defer to Simon, but yeah, you can't really have the proposer walking out.
No, that's what I want you to get. That's why I want you to get to the vote, Kieran, and not hold things up.
Stand by. Hang on.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Couple of minutes, that's all. Well, whilst we're doing that, in the middle of it, just do some housekeeping. The senior planning officer, Miss Maguire, wants to put it politely. I'll put it politely. Somewhat vexed. Putting it politely, somewhat vexed that members aren't shown up to the pre-agenda. He feels that isn't useful a way of conducting the business of the planning committee. I have pointed out that some councillors feel it looks like predetermination. I think that was the view of one particular group. I used to have that view, and now I find it very useful so that we've got questions ready for officers when they would get to the committee and they know how to reply. Councillor Smythe.
I normally do go, as you know. I haven't been to the last one or the one before because Friday afternoons are really a difficult time for me personally on some weeks. We used to have them on Mondays, just before the committee on the Tuesday. I don't see why we shouldn't go back to Mondays before the committee on Wednesdays now, which would, I think, well, certainly for me would be better.
That's true. The argument from the officers was that it didn't give them enough time to make inquiries that councillors wanted made. I think we need to move forward. We can come back to this afterwards, but do get the pre-agenda if you can do, please. Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. We could just delegate authority to officers to draft the condition, but I've scribbled something quickly which may be along the right lines. Simply speaking, Councillor Vernon Jackson, you mentioned overdevelopment. I've included that word. There should be a maximum of 7 persons in occupation. Reason, in order to prevent over-occupation and overdevelopment of the premises, which would harm local residential amenity in conflict with policy PCS 23 of the local plan and the HMO SPD.
All right, then, members, there you have it. Anyone else? No?
Councillor Vernon Jackson confirmed that he
I'm overjoyed.
Excellent.
And it's been seconded by me. So we'll move that. All those in favour of that with the condition attached, please show that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed for your attention today and for coming. Sorry?
Can you show your hands again, please? You are very quick sometimes, members. It just helps to pause. Not that quick.
All those in favour of the Councillor,
7.
not Councillor Smith.
In favour. So Councillor Smith abstaining. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the clarification. Thank you for noticing that. Good luck with your hospital appointment, Robert. Once again, thank you to everybody for coming and your attention. Councillor Atkins.
Chair, can I raise one tiny quick piece of housekeeping? It may be nothing can be done to accommodate this, but for the next 3 meetings, which are during university term time, I teach until 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. Now, I have mentioned that, and I mentioned that at the start of the year. I don't know if there's any possibility of the start time of the planning committee going back to during the afternoon to accommodate me attending. If there isn't, I will either have to drop off the committee or send a deputy for at least the next 3 meetings.
Indeed, members of my own group struggle to get here even at this time of the day. So if you would send a deputy along, we'd be very grateful, because I don't want to go into the evenings again for